Here.
Hanson, expected, and Paul Mary.
Here. And we will now hold the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we'll begin the hearing.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we will begin the public hearing. First, I'd like to ask the clerk if we have anyone registered to speak.
We do. Gabriel Loacano.
Thanks.
Welcome.
Thank you. I've never been here before, so tell me if I do something wrong, but I will try to be quick. Do I say my address?
Yes, please.
1209 Washington Avenue. And I'm here to speak about the budget and in particular the museum educator position to talk about why I think that's really important. I am currently the chair of the museum board. I'm also a history professor at UWO and the father of 3 children in Oshkosh area school district schools, of whom only one has yet been to the museum on a field trip. And I'll say a little bit about why, and if you'll forgive me, in the form of a timeline very quickly. So, in 2014, the museum lost a position that was half museum educator in difficult economic times. In 2017, the museum nevertheless created a new cutting-edge, award-winning exhibit about the history of our region called People of the Waters, which was designed in good part to help Wisconsin children learn about indigenous Wisconsin history, something, incidentally, Wisconsin children are required to do by state law since 1989, Act 31. As an aside, as a history professor at UWO, I always ask students about this act and what they have learned, and the results are still not very good. It is not a law that is well adhered to. But we in Oshkosh have a great tool to help our students learn more about indigenous Wisconsin, and it is the exhibit at the museum. In 2019 and 2021, we got a little bit of help, a summer intern, and then a 20% position from the school district to help with museum education. This is good, but it's just not enough. In the aftermath of our new exhibit, we were really disappointed to see that students were not coming from Oshkosh. My own eldest daughter didn't come despite having a wonderful teacher that year who just didn't know about the exhibit. It was my middle daughter who has so far come. Incidentally, she remembers it really vividly. Her museum visit 3 years ago is still something she thinks about and talks about to this day, and connects in particular to indigenous history. In 2022, this year, after years of conversation, a real breakthrough happened. The school district has committed to sending all third grade students to the museum one way or another, which I think is wonderful for us and for them. The students are finally coming, but we don't have a museum educator who can do the job of connecting the museum to the curriculum, help teachers with this field trip and make it possible. We're really excited they're coming, but our staff is overtaxed, and ultimately this is unsustainable. So I am here just to ask you to partner with the museum in making us make use of this great resource for our children's education by hiring a museum educator. Thank you.
Thank you.
Margie Davy.
Welcome.
Thank you. I am Margie Davy, 885 Portside Court, and I'm here tonight as the chair of the Sustainability Board, again. As you know, I currently serve on the Plan Commission as well as the Sustainability Board, and I served on the Rental Housing Advisory Board at its inception. My main claim to fame, though, is that I'm good at going to meetings because I actually show up. But it does give me a strong background with the city. Our current Sustainability Board, however, is a very strong group, and they have been throughout the ages. Right now, we have 4 members that have sustainability degrees. 2 have chemistry degrees. We have a specialist in analytics, and we have 2 that are currently sustainability directors for other entities, including the award-winning UWO, so you probably knew that. We all have a strong interest in sustainability, but without any clout, even this stellar group can't get enough done. SAB has a budget enhancement request to fund an initial year of a sustainability specialist. I know that some of you are not in support of that. I do watch the council meetings. Here is why you should be. A quick reminder about sustainability. It is a 3-legged stool: economy, environment, social justice. All 3 of those are important. A sustainable budget is a cost-saving tool while also providing social justice and protecting the environment. We need a person to be a change agent to accelerate and showcase what's possible for the integration of sustainable policy and action within the city. We need someone to manage communication and create cohesion between departments, boards, committees, commissions, staff, and citizens. And they can gather data and write grant applications to fund sustainable initiatives, beginning with their position. And that might have been part of what hadn't been heard before, so I want to reiterate that. A grant writer won't get the entire job done, but a sustainability director can be a grant writer. We need someone to serve as a full-time liaison with all parts of the city. The SAB was asked to review the central facilities building, though without the then council support to capture the metrics because it cost money, we don't have data to encourage the same practices for the new parks building. Wouldn't that have been nice to have, to know what works and what saves the city money? Who is the advocate for sustainable practices to bend all of us in Oshkosh on the bid board? The Landmarks Commission? The Library Board? Transit Advisory? Who on the Long Range Finance Committee understands the benefits of sustainability well enough to advocate for practices to enhance rather than hinder? Do these important city parts of city government, staffed by volunteers, even know that the city of Oshkosh has a sustainability plan and which chapters are applicable to them? Do you? Have any of you read this? I know a couple of you have, and I thank you for that. I know some others probably have not. You are elected for a 3-year term. I get that. Sustainable benefits often take longer than 3 years to see the full benefit for that. So I understand why you don't want to fund something that can't be realized during your term of office. But had past councils decided to do something to fund sustainable actions that had a 5 or 10-year payback, we'd already be there, and we'd already be seeing that with the city. And that's where we're falling down, folks. The city needs to hire someone with a sustainability background and roll the DEI needs into it, because that is very much a part of sustainability, is a social justice. It's one of the one of the legs of the 3-legged stool. So I urge you to find the funds for an initial year, hire the right person, and the position will not only pay for itself, it will provide additional funding for the city in so many areas and provide opportunities we are now missing out on. And I would like to thank 2 or 3 of you who actually helped with the updates on this, so thank you. I know you've read them.
Bill Bracken.
Thank you. My name is Bill Bracken. I
Welcome.
reside at 1770 Chatham Drive. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I'm speaking as the board president of the Library Board of Trustees. And I'd like to just tell you a little bit about my background, because I spent 41 years representing municipalities like yourself and school districts in collective bargaining. So I dealt with Mark Roloff, Russ Van Gompel, John Fitzpatrick for at least 25 years, and I represented the city of Oshkosh in many of those dealings.
So his is a sad story, apparently.
It's a very sad story. So I'm appealing to your, empathy. But it's a little funny for me sitting on this side or standing on this side of the table, because I used to represent all you folks and people like you. And I really do understand how difficult it is in these financial times. And, you know, the library, we set our own budget as well, and so we've wrestled with that. And I'm here tonight to really ask you for your support. I appreciate the support you've given us in the past, but this year you've had no increase for us, and I'm really here to ask you for $82,000 in support of the library and what we're doing. And I really think there's three basic reasons why this is. Number one is timeliness. Now more than ever, we have to have good information. In this country, we're looking for facts, and the library can deliver that. That's where you would go to find resources that can help you determine the truth. We've lost a lot of education opportunities with our children that haven't had the face-to-face contact in the teaching environment. I think a lot of that progress could be made up at the library. But we need resources to do that. And that's one thing that's going to be cut if we're not able to get a little more money out of you folks. The number two reason is equity. If you look in the past, the city has not supported the library for whatever reason in the same basis that our comparables, internal comparables, would look to. So if I look over the past 5 years, the museum's budget increased 8.7%, senior center 18%, and the library only 6.4%. Now, I know you people support the library, but you have to do so, and we look at it financially. We'd want to see that support. Our last 5 years, you've given us 1.3% increase in the tax levy on average. That's just simply not going to do it. So this year, the city's proposing, as I understand it, a 4.19% levy increase. We're asking for a 3% levy increase of about $82,000. That would really help us out. We think that's reasonable and fair, especially when given the comparables that I just mentioned. And the third point I'd make is investment. And I think you all know support for the library is an investment in the future of the quality of life in this community. We have a very ambitious strategic plan at the library, but we need your resources to help fulfill that plan. So we're at a critical crossroads in our library budget and our development, and we're going to need that support from you folks to make it happen. If we don't have that support, we're going to end up cutting programs and services, materials, and that's just not something that we want to do. It's just not in our DNA. We go out of our way to find new ways to help people. That's what we're all about. If you ever looked at one of our newsletters, you'd be amazed at the programs that the library puts on. I'm constantly amazed at the programs for the young, for the old. We got a paper shredder because people were asking for that. We have a notary service. We have 3D printers. We have programs for the old, for the young, for everybody. So I just want to reaffirm that I appreciate all your support in the past. The library board certainly appreciates that. We are respectfully requesting that you support our $82,000 request this year for additional funds. We think you can do the right thing and exceed your 4.19 just a little bit. You know, when you look at it spread over the city of some 70,000 people, it's less than the price of a Powerball ticket, you know. And unlike the Powerball ticket that has the risk of probably not winning, if you give us that $82,000, you know you're going to win because those resources are going to go to good use at the public library. So I want to just emphasize the partnership we have. We enjoy that. We hope that you can help us move the library forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jennifer Considine.
Welcome.
Thank you. Hello, council members. I'm Jennifer Considine, 300 Dale Avenue. I've lived in the city of Oshkosh for 14 years. I've come before you before as a member of ESTER, which is an interfaith social justice organization in this community, to talk about the importance of supporting busing in this community. I still think that's really important, but today I want to talk to you about a different issue, and that's the issue of supporting this diversity, equity, and inclusion coordinator position that is part of the budget. I think this is an incredibly important position for us to support. I honor the members of the council who have come forward and supported the creation of a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee for the city. And I think that committee is doing absolutely incredible work to think about how we can create a more welcoming and inclusive committee and community. But unfortunately, things aren't changing fast enough. When the committee was created in 2019, one of the things that was cited was the citizen survey results and how many citizens found this to be an inclusive and welcoming committee. And at that community, and at that point in time, 42% of the community members identifying Oshkosh as welcoming and inclusive. That seems really low to me, and really unfortunate that only 42% are strongly agreeing that this is a welcoming and inclusive committee. In 2021, that number didn't go up, it went down. It went down in 2021. And so I think we have work to do in this community, and I think hiring a diversity, equity, and inclusion coordinator, funding that position, shows the city's commitment to grow, to change, to honor the diversity that is present in our community. It can help us to be accountable to the DEI goals that the city has, can provide, the person in that position could provide support to staff, to community members, to local businesses. I think this is important not only for the people who are currently in our community, but for the people who we want to have come to our community. I had a conversation with a student, I teach at the university, I had a conversation with a student 2 weeks ago who's graduating and looking for a job. And I said, oh, are you going to stay in Oshkosh? And they said, no, I'm moving to Appleton. And I said, why are you moving to Appleton? And they said, it's a more inclusive community. And that made me really sad. It broke my heart. And one of the things that the student shared with me was that there is a diversity, equity, and inclusion coordinator that the city of Appleton hires and funds, and that speaks to their inclusion. And I would hope that we would also fund this position here in Oshkosh and speak to our goals and our commitment to including everyone in our community as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's no one else registered.
Okay. Is there anyone else here that would like to speak on the budget that didn't get a chance to register? All right. Thank you very much, everyone. We will move into our workshop on the city budget.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
In the past, I've provided just a brief overview, highlight, 30,000 view of the budget with a PowerPoint presentation, just to kind of explain for the people here and for the people at home what's all involved in that. I was hoping that would still be part of the public hearing if you'd like, but that's certainly your call.
And you have, we have that loaded for the screen?
Yes.
Okay. Council okay with that? I think so.
Thank you very much. I also have a copy of it, but if you prefer, I would prefer to wait to give you a copy of the presentation that I'm making this evening until after it's made. You can just take it with you with references. But I think you can follow along on the screen fairly well as we move forward. First of all, what I tend to do is want to point out we have a multiple of sources of funds for all of our city budget. So when we look at our city budget, it includes more than just the general fund. It includes things like when we collect funds, we collect property tax, and that's the largest share, 36%. We have 15% of our funding comes from intergovernmental revenues, about 1% from license and permits, a small sliver from fines and forfeitures, charges for services about 4%. The library through fees is less than 1%. Our utilities, that's our what we call enterprise funds in the accounting term, and that's basically water, sewer, stormwater, but it also has some other enterprise funds that we have for inspection service and a couple other services that are set up really, excuse me, to be accounted for like a business. So those are the enterprise funds at about 34%. We have charges internally for 6%, miscellaneous revenues of 3%, and then some other financing sources and the sale of capital assets. So that's where all our money comes from. Where does all our money go? All of the uses, most of it, again, about a third goes to our utilities enterprise funds. About 9% goes to debt service. The general fund accounts for about a third, and again, the general fund has the primary operating expenses and tracking of revenue expenses for operational purposes. We have other special revenue funds where we account in separate buckets, special revenues, and the library is a special revenue fund, and there's some other special revenue funds. We'll talk about those a little bit later on. Capital projects, internal service, and then our tax increment financing districts account for about 5% of our funds going out. So that's just kind of a big overview of where we collect money and where we spend money. I'd like to just take a minute and focus on the general fund because, you know, most of our operations, day-to-day operations are accounted for in our general fund. In our general fund, 45% of the money that we need to operate comes from taxes. About a third, 32% comes from intergovernmental revenues. We get 1.5% in license and permits, fines and forfeitures, 1.6, charges, 8.3. Internal services actually come back into the general fund at about 5%. We have some miscellaneous revenue and some other financing sources and the sale of capital assets. So I just wanted to give you a big picture of how that pie gets divvied up. I know I'm going through this kind of fast. I'm trying to keep this high level. I don't know if the city manager has any additional comments, but otherwise I can show you some of the specific numbers if you'd like.
Probably the only one I would point out in the past, there's been some criticism of us using fees. And as you can tell, our general fund, we get about 1/12 of all our revenues from fees. We hardly rely on fees to do much more than cover the costs of specific programs or services we provide. So I think it's important to point that out.
So again, you might not be able to read all of these percentages, and I apologize, but I wanted to show you the numbers. And I wanted to highlight the fact that, you know, property tax revenue within the general fund, you have to remember, we'll talk about levy a little bit later on in this presentation. So we have other levy going to other purposes, and I'll defer that for a little bit. Our intergovernmental, let me backtrack. Our property tax revenue is going up about 4.7% from 22 to 23. But our intergovernmental revenue is relatively flat at just a 1.28% increase. We're actually projecting lower license and permits revenue just based on historical numbers, reduction of about 15%. We're pretty flat on fines and forfeitures. We have some more charges for services coming in from other functions more than in the past. We have some internal service charges that's going down the collection. But this is just the numbers of the general fund and the major revenue categories. And I know the city manager would like to talk to you a little bit, and we've talked to the city council, but I'd like to emphasize the point to the public. We talked quite a bit about intergovernmental revenue and the state shared revenue system and how it's not working the way it was intended to work. We also get general transportation aids, expenditure restraint program, and a couple other things. Just briefly, and I'll turn it over to the city manager, but the bright blue line is the total state payments for shared revenue. And what's important on this, if you look back to the early 2000s, it was relatively flat. Towards the end of the 2000s, we had some appropriations that were reduced. And since 2012, it's been relatively flat, actually declining a little bit. So that's the amount of money that the state is giving all local governments throughout the state of Wisconsin. If you look at the state's collection on income tax, corporate income tax, individual income tax, and sales tax, you can see that the state is collecting more money than ever, and it's increasing. Now is not the time to discuss it, but I've talked to council before. When shared revenue program was created in the early 1900s, 1911, it was to provide property tax relief, and the mission of shared revenue was to share the income tax. Actually, 80% of the income tax went back to the community where it came from. It's called return to roots or origin. They've gone away from that model to basically one that's considered municipal aid, and it's an appropriation. And that appropriation, as you see, has been relatively flat, in fact, declining just slightly. I know this is something the city managers worked on statewide. I know the league's working on this statewide. It is a huge issue, not only for Oshkosh, but for communities across the state of Wisconsin. Mr. City Manager, I don't know if you want to share any more of your thoughts on that.
Probably is much more for our audience so that they understand the context in which we're working. Because even the prior sheet, I handed them out because I knew you couldn't see it very well, but Russ had pointed out a 1.28% increase in intergovernmental revenue. You'll recall that I reported that was before we got the final gas tax number from the state of Wisconsin, which was about a $150,000 increase. So we're really talking about, decreased, I hope I said that, yeah,
you said that.
decrease. So really, we're looking at maybe a 0.3% increase in state revenues. So when the state fails to distribute and share the revenue that they collect, we collect, just so everybody understands this, because even people who've been around a long time, we get no sales tax. The sales tax you pay at the store, the city gets zero. The income tax that you pay, that's out of your paycheck every week or every 2 weeks, we get zero. That all goes to the state. The state just redistributes it through shared revenue. Well, they don't call it shared revenue anymore. They finally dealt with reality because they're not sharing. So Rush, if you can go back to that chart, or Jacob, you could put it back up. I want everybody to see this. This, the graph, the way it looks, is almost identical to our own experience. This is what the cities throughout the state, cities, towns, and villages, so this isn't unique to Oshkosh. We've been frozen or reduced, and I could go back, this only goes back to 2004. This story's been going on for 30 years that Russ and I have been finance directors and city managers throughout the state. The system of funding local governments is broken. When the state has had a reduction in sales tax or income tax. As you can see, 2008 is a great example where the state actually experienced a cut in revenue. It's understandable that they would cut revenue to their municipalities. That's only fair. That's only being part of the sharing of what used to be called shared revenue. But as the revenues have recovered, and I would point out to you from 2004 until 2019, that the state sales tax revenue and the state income tax revenue increased by 50%, while ours decreased by 20%. Why is that? The short answer is there's no sharing of the state revenue that is generated right here in Oshkosh. The council has heard this many times, and to the council's credit, they've given me direction to work on these types of issues at the state level, and I'm working on a state committee, but we need to fix the broken system of funding local government in Wisconsin. And this is just an example. And the folks who spoke tonight, this is why, we have the challenges that we have before us. And I know council understands it, and I appreciate the opportunity to get on my stump again. So thank you, Mayor and council, for letting me do that.
One last thing, Mark, I think everybody fails to realize, there is a $5 billion surplus in Madison. I mean, this is absolutely absurd that they're sitting on a $5 billion CD and not dispersing those funds. So talk to your legislators and your people down in Madison, but it's criminal. They're sitting on $5 billion of your tax dollars and not giving us any of it back. So thank you.
To add to that, Bill, I mean, I think it's worth pointing out the actual practical impact is your property tax levy is higher than it would be because we're saving so much money from the state. So the actual financial burden on your average resident is worse. So a solution here would actually save everybody money.
Yeah, our general fund is going up 3.41% as proposed, but our tax levy is going up 4.19%. The reason for that difference is because we have to rely on property taxes to cover this. We in Wisconsin, not just Oshkosh, we in Wisconsin are over-reliant on property taxes. We need to expand, broaden our base of which we fund local governments, and that's why the system's broken and needs repair. And Russ, please give me the hook so you can, Russ has like 3 more pages of his presentation,
Yeah.
and I've taken up too much time.
No, it's good for the public to understand some of the pressures that you're facing as elected officials and that we're facing as staff as we try to put assemble a 2023 operating budget. And I forgot to say at the beginning of this, is our proposed budget is a balanced budget. So we have identified some use of fund balance that I'm going to cover in a few slides, but overall, our expenses are equal to our revenues coming in. So I gave you an overview on the revenue and expenses, but our revenue, but now let me just turn to expenses, excuse me. It's no secret, most of our funding goes to public safety. Public safety is police, fire, and ambulance. We also have, that's about 62% of our general fund. We also have expenditures out of our general fund for just general government operations, general administration, and some other activities that don't get allocated. Public works on the general fund side is about 9%. Transportation and transportation-related activities, about 2%. Parks and recreation, about 5%. Conservation and development, which includes community development and those type of things, are 4%. And unclassified is 5%. So this is, again, just showing you the big pie of the general fund expenditures. We have, as I talked about early on, we have other activities that we account outside the general fund, but this covers mostly the general fund. If you're to look at the numbers, general government actually is proposed to go down by 2.5%. We do have some increases in public safety. Again, these are expenses before any budget enhancements. This is our recommended and proposed budget. Public Works is going down, and we talked about that during the workshops, about 11%, because we're starting to account for some of those activities in what we call internal service funds. There's an increase in transportation. As a percentage basis, actually, culture and recreation is going down by a tick. Conservation and development's going down by about 5%. And we got a huge increase in 2023 for our unclassified budget. We spoke about that during our workshops. That's primarily because we have a huge contingency for our internal wages and class and compensation study. So on a budgetary basis, we're adding about over $1 million into our contingency accounts for that purpose.
And that's, instead of weaving it into each of the departments, we have it there until we know what the actual impact is. And I expect that you'll be receiving that report at your second meeting in November.
So from a pure accounting standpoint, we don't accumulate owner's equity like a business would. When we look at our balance sheet, we look at assets and liabilities. The difference between our assets and liabilities is what we call fund balance, or our reserves. It's also, each year you have revenue and expenditures, and if revenue's exceeding expenditures, add to your fund balance. Likewise, if expenditures exceed revenues, you draw down on your fund balance. And I'm proud to, I think it's very sound financial position that the city is in, where we've increased our fund balance. And I don't know, Jake, if you could pop the presentation back up on the screen. The big thing is, and I have some specific numbers, but if you look at our 2022 end of the year, and it's an estimate because we're still ongoing with revenue and expenses, but at the end of the year, we're projecting $18 million, $18.3 million in our fund balance. Our city council and our long-range finance committee looked at our fund balance, and again, I apologize, this slide is something you should never do, but I'm required by our ordinances to give you a statement on where our fund balance is. And the message here is with that $18.3 million fund balance, we would be at about 36% of next year's expenditures. By policy, we want to be between 16 and 30% of fund balance, and we want to keep to that because in our cash flow needs, we have a lot of expenditures that go out on a steady basis during the year. But as we talked about our payments from the state of Wisconsin, In addition to holding the line, they actually have made their payments to local governments more in line with their budgetary needs. And actually, they provide 15% of our shared revenue in the month of July and 85% of their shared revenue or local government aid in the month of November. Now, if you're running a business, you know that if you got the expenditures coming in on a constant basis during the year, and you got that 1/3 of your revenue or 20% of your revenue coming in the last month of the year, you got to have some cushion. So long-range finance and the city council has recommended that policy. As we presented a proposed budget, we're looking at some use of that fund balance. We talked about this in the workshop, but about $2 million of the fund balance is being recommended to use to reduce our debt service levy because the city council decided to issue debt in 2022 for 2023 projects, and we didn't think it was appropriate to collect taxes in 23 for capital projects that haven't been constructed yet. So we're going to ask you to consider a one-time use of fund balance for that. In addition, we're going to start the process of a revaluation. We're required to be within 10% of the market. Quite honestly, right now, our ratio from assessed to equalized value is going to come in at about 70%. Those are estimates at this time. We won't have the final valuation numbers until 2 weeks from today, so I won't have it for next week. But you will be adopting a budget and adopting a levy, and the levy just gets divided by the valuation to come up with the rate. We got to go through that process of looking at our valuation. We also want to use some fund balance for our Emerald Ash Borer remediation program, about $250,000. And then we have the update on the comprehensive outdoor recreation plan. Once every 5 to 10 years. We do an update on that, and then we're also looking at the potential impact fee study. The impact fee is a fee placed on subdivisions, and we do that for parkland. It could also be used for some other activities. Some communities do an impact fee on subdivisions for fire stations as well, and we have to follow strict state statutes allow for the collection of those impact fees and allow for those expenditures. So we're looking for some assistance to kind of do that study. So those are the major uses of fund balance as proposed. Mr. City Manager, do you have anything else on those?
I think the important thing to point out, even though I think it was weaved into what Russ's statements were, all of these are one-time expenditures. It would be inappropriate to use fund balance for ongoing operations. That would create a bad situation in which we'd be taken out of fund balance and then eventually becoming a burden on the tax bill. So the idea is these are one-time expenditures that we can, they'll be here 1 year and they'll be gone the next, so we won't have to worry about that. So that's why we're recommending these uses of fund balance.
So that's kind of an overview on the general fund, revenue, expenses, and fund balance. And if you're at home or you're following along the presentation, you're going to say to yourself, what does this mean? We send out tax bills to everybody in December. So our property taxes go into various buckets. And the next slide on the presentation shows where those buckets go. And just again, as a reminder, and I know I've talked to the council about this, but for every dollar that's paid in property taxes, it's important for everybody to understand that 40 cents of that dollar stays with the city. 36 cents on a dollar goes to the school district. 20-some cents goes to the county. 4 or 5 cents.
4 cents to the tech.
4 cents to the tech. So when you're looking at your tax bill, we're only responsible for 40 cents on a dollar that you pay. And what do we do with that collection? We put a lot of that into our general fund operations, but as I talked earlier, we have other activities that rely on levy to help support operations. And just going around the clock, we have separate accounting for our garbage collection and disposal, which is about 3% of our levy. Street lighting is about 2%. We had some people talking about the museum tonight, and we've talked about the museum in the past. 2% of our levy goes towards the museum. 1% goes towards senior services. And right now, 6% of our levy goes to the library. 1% goes to the cemetery. Less than 1% goes to Leach Amphitheater, the Pollock Water Park, and rental inspections. Our equipment fund is about 3%. We take about $1 million a year for capital projects, and we pay cash for capital projects out of the current levy. And then the other 30% goes to debt service payments. So equate that to your home mortgage payment. We take out debt to finance capital projects, and we have to pay that debt back. So about a third, or just under 30% of our levy goes towards debt service, and I can talk about that a little bit more with some numbers. And then the last 2% goes to transit. So that's kind of the big pie of what happens to the levy that we collect for city services. Again, I apologize for the numbers on this, but I think it's important for the public hearing and people to understand exactly where that goes. So we're looking at a tax levy of $45,730,200, an increase of $1.8 million from last year, which is a 4.19% that we talked about. So that's the proposed levy without enhancements right now. And you can see where that fits in with changes from other years going back to 2019. So we've been running about 3 to 4% increase in levies over the last couple of years. But this year is 4.19% as it stands right now.
Russ, can you briefly talk about the insurance hit that we took also this year that the public may not be aware of, and how that fits into blowing up our budgets and things like that? Would you address that, please?
Sure, and I may defer to the city manager a little bit. The city manager did a special city manager report on Oshkosh Media. It's also on YouTube. If you haven't seen that presentation, you or the public should take a look at it. But I think the number was about $900,000 for a health insurance increase that had to be rolled into our budgets. And that's already been allocated to all the various departments.
Yeah, and it reflects a 16% increase in cost for health insurance. So that's something that is getting absorbed with all those other increases. So that's a significant part of something that affects every single department. But again, that's one of those things where, we have a insurance plan that is comparable to other local governments. I don't think it's any greater or lesser, but that 16% is based on our experience. We're what's called partially self-funded, so we pay a certain part of the first cost, and then we have what's called stop-loss insurance for anything above a certain amount. But 16% is a pretty sizable increase. That includes with us asking employees to pay some greater deductibles and co-pays, because we recognize, and I think the employees recognize, that they need to do something as well.
City Manager, along those lines, the Three Waves Clinic, our portion, the city and school district shared clinic, when that was proposed, the idea was it was hopefully going to help with some of these health costs. So when we talk about the 16% increase in the insurance and the health costs, that's except for the Three Waves Clinic is not figured into that in any way. Do we know how much that's helping, or do we not include that?
The Three Waves Clinic costs are included in that amount,
They are,
but
okay.
we've been able to keep that function at a fairly steady amount over the last few years because of the partnerships we have. And to the degree we can get more people going over to Three Waves, it actually works better. And that's one of the initiatives that we're going to be working on with our employee groups, because when you use the Three Waves Clinic, currently we have no cost for our employees to go to that clinic, whereas you do have to pay the deductibles and the co-pays at any other place. So we're doing our darndest to keep steering people that way, and the new group that is operating the clinic on behalf of the 3 agencies, they're doing everything they can to provide services that will direct employees there. So we're still doing that, and I would say, from what I recall from a few years ago, we're probably saving about $250,000 a year over and above the cost of the clinic. That lowers our health insurance costs.
We certainly recognize that the cost of benefits and health insurance is a big burden for the taxpayers. I just want to remind everybody that, we have gone to this partially self-funded plan. It was more expensive if we went to a fully funded plan. There are also some other plans available, like the state of Wisconsin offers a group health insurance plan. Those costs would actually be more expensive than what we have. So we've done our due diligence, working with the Director of Administrative Services. We've basically tried to hold the line on our health insurance costs as best we can.
Do we know how many people under city staff are utilizing that clinic? Because I know
don't-
we had that same conversation last year, that it wasn't quite, participation wasn't quite what we wanted it to be.
I think all the, I don't have an exact number, but it's been ticking up, but as the deductibles increase and the co-pays increase, it's going to steer people over there. And some of the services, they're going to have a full physician, for example, working over there. Previously, it was a nurse practitioner. They're looking at perhaps adding a physical therapist. So doing things that if we get more people going there, we can afford to expand the services more. And we get a little bit better every year, but it's still a process. There are people who are very committed to their current physician, but when they get the bill at home and they realize that they talk to their colleagues here at the city, and they're like, well, I went to I went to 3 ways for the exact same service and I paid $0, it starts to get people thinking that way.
Thank you.
So Jake, if we could go back to the presentation, I just have a few more slides to finish up our presentation tonight. So the next slide, again, if you want to know how this impacts each homeowner, we spread our taxes based on assessed valuation. We had a estimated slight uptick in our assessed valuation, just about 0.2%. So the assessed tax rate is projected to be at 46 cents higher than it was the last year, and that's 3.98. So even though you're adopting the levy with a 4% increase in the levy, the impact on the rate is under 4% at 3.98. We should also just show the equalized value, and people often question, why do we have assessed equalized values? Equalized values is used to allocate costs from other jurisdictions that cross jurisdictional boundaries. So it really doesn't mean a lot for the city, but the school district has jurisdiction, it has property outside the city. The county has obviously levy that impacts the jurisdictions outside the city of Oshkosh. So they kind of use the equalized rate, and so sometimes you might hear other jurisdictions talk about the impact on the equalized rate. All that is an illustrated purpose for us. It really doesn't change how we levy or collect our taxes. If you were to look at the rate itself, the assessed rate, obviously, like I said, is going up, but because we have so much growth on our equalized value, and this is leading to that fair market ratio. Let me just jump back one slide. At the very bottom of this is a ratio of fair market value, which is a ratio of assessed to equalized value. Back in 2019, we were at 95% of the market. In 2023, when we do our taxes, we're estimating that we're going to be at about 71% of the market. The state says if you get outside that 10% window for 3 years, you have to take corrective action. So that's why we have to go through that reevaluation process because we're outside that 10% window. So this is just an illustration of the rates themselves. Nothing's other than illustrative purposes. But I think what I really want to focus on and end the presentation, and
Russ, I want to interrupt you for a
Okay.
second, especially for the people at home. So this is the bad news, because the state requires us to reassess. So the politicians in Madison are going to say, oh, we're going to lower your levy, but the smaller dollar amount, the levy, is going to be put on a bigger value for your home. And there lies the cash grab. Your taxes are going to go up. But-
let me just stop you real quick.
All right,
If I just may clarify a couple points, because I don't want you to get too far down that path.
all right.
So, right now, as I mentioned, if a piece of property sells for $100,000, we would have it on average on our books at $70,000. Now, if we go through a revaluation and the levy stays the same and the valuation goes up to that 100,000 so that we have a 1-to-1 ratio, we don't collect any more taxes, but we do have a lower tax rate because we have a larger denominator on the bottom. So the misnomer is revaluations cost money. It costs money if your particular property is less than the average and and getting increased more. When we say on average, it'll go up 30%, some people might only go up 15%, some people might go up 40%. If you're going up 40%, your piece of the pie becomes bigger and you're gonna pay more taxes.
Right.
But if you're the average property and we're at a 30% differential and now we increase that by 30%, the rate goes down by 30% and you pay the same tax.
Let me ask you a more simple question. So after we do the revaluation, what are we expected to collect as additional revenue?
What,
Well, I'm walking you right into the
That's
minefield.
That's the 4.19%. That's why I
Exactly.
prefer to focus on the levy, because
I
you can't hide the levy.
I just want the people at home to know that they will be paying more in taxes. Some will, some won't, but they will be paying more.
with all due respect, I think that the biggest decision point in front of elected officials is your levy. And if you leave the levy the same, it doesn't matter. It does matter, but the rate will be compensated by the changes in valuation. The trouble in some communities when they do that is all of a sudden they see this huge increase in the valuation and they change their levy. As long as the elected officials, and again, you have to be, have some self-control. You have control over the levy. If you keep that levy into a responsible review and justification, the rate will fix itself. So the word of caution as a finance director to you as elected officials is when that happens, watch the levy and do what you can to keep the levy the same. Don't increase the levy, because that's when cities and towns and villages get into trouble, is when they increase the base, they increase the levy, and then people are trying to figure out what goes on. So you're going in an area that gets a little technical, but yeah, the big thing is watch the levy.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it always. And folks at home, we've got the best finance director in the world, so.
Well, thank you. In closing, I think it's important to understand that on a $150,000 house, Jake, if you could pop that back up, please. Oops. On a $150,000 house, and the hard part is this system of collecting property taxes is we can send out a property tax bill on an annual basis, and everybody has an option to pay installments on that. But if you take a $150,000 home, for the year, you would pay, oh, did I have that dollar amount? No.
Yeah, thought you did.
I did. Anyways, on a monthly basis, you take the annual amount divided by 12, your monthly cost for city services, again, this is city services, is $151 a month, $150.88. Where does that all go? If you're paying $150, this again is a $150,000 house, piece of property. And there's no denying this, but a bulk of that goes to our debt service payments. And I know long-range finance, and I know city councils looked at that. It's actually about $1,810 per year. But most of this goes to debt service, and we have to manage our debt service. We're trying to be as fiscal responsible as we can and trying to minimize our debt so that it matches the useful life of the assets we're financing. But we don't want to take on more debt as a share of our levy costs. So we have to kind of watch that. So on $150 a month, $44.71 goes to debt service. Police is $22. Fire is $20. Public Works is $10. Library is $10. General government's $9.60. Garbage collection's $5. Transit's $4.48. Our capital improvements that we talked about, where we're paying cash for capital projects, $3.74. Parks, we're paying just under $3.70. Street lighting, just under $4. Museums, $3.60 or $3.59. Community development, $2.95. Senior services, $1.21. Cemetery, $1.11, and all others, $3.36. So I would challenge city council, I would challenge the public to always keep in mind, on a $150,000 house, you're paying $150 a month, and look at all the other things that you have in your own family budget that you're spending $150 a month on. You can find whatever you want, what other utility you want to look at, or any other type of spending. I have to say, as finance director, I believe we are providing a good value to our residents for $150 a month. I know not everybody's going to agree with that, but when you break it down that way, and I'm not doing it to try to sell anything, I'm just representing what that tax bill actually means on a monthly basis. And it's unfortunate that we have to send out an annual bill, and that's required by law.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to piggyback on what the finance director just said there and the value of it. Councilmember Miller usually loves that slide that gets put up there. And since Finance Director Van Gompel came on board a few years ago, it's one of the visuals that he's added to the presentation that it adds a lot of, the presentation itself adds a lot of value, but that slide is very, very easy to understand. Doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what background you have. You can understand that $150 a month, Jake, will you throw that slide back up for me so I can use some real numbers? But $150 a month, depending on the size of your home, that might be your cable and your internet bill. That might be your cell phone bill. But it's something relatable that you can correspond to at home. And for that value, you're getting trash and garbage at $5, about $5 a month. You're getting access to a world-class library. We've got a great library for $10 a month. You're getting access to our museum for $3 a month. You've got a police department that has the ability to respond within a few minutes to an urgent call, and a fire department that's equally responsive. So for $150 a month, you're getting, I think, in my opinion, a hell of a value. And as the finance director stated, plenty of people can disagree with that, and that would be completely fine. But I think when you compare this to some of the costs that residents and homeowners and property owners are willing to take on every month between, like I mentioned, cell phone, internet, cable, things like that, we're here to provide the most essential services possible. And I think we're doing it for a pretty good dollar, in my opinion. So I just wanted to piggyback on the finance director's positive comments.
That concludes my presentation on the budget.
Thank you, Russ.
If I can ask a question, I think what we're probably going to end up is moving into some of the enhancement discussions probably next. But I had a very brief conversation with the finance director earlier on a couple of questions, and he alluded to that there might be, with some of the enhancements, specifically I think some utility ones, before we even get into the discussion, is there anything you want to share that you may be wanting to share with us before we even get into those discussions regarding those?
Sure, and I was going to cover that in my introductory remarks, and I apologize for not covering that. But the Public Works Director and myself and the city manager had a discussion about, again, we're sensitive to the impact on the community, especially not only the levy that we need to adopt next week, but also our user charges. And each year, we go through a process where we look at our 10-year capital improvement plan, and we look at what our utility rates could be going into the future. And I know when the city manager and myself was at a recent chamber event, we received a lot of discussion on our water, sewer, stormwater rates. We need to do a little bit more time and investigation on our sewer rates. So our recommendation to council is, next week when you adopt the budget, is to adopt the budget, set the levy, but defer adoption on the utility budgets for the water, sanitary sewer, and stormwater utilities until we complete our analysis on the user rates. We anticipate that before the end of the year. We're not going to be ready to present that next week. So we're going to ask you to defer on those. If there's any budget enhancements on that, I think with all due respect, the city manager has recommended one of 4 utility positions be considered. You certainly have the prerogative to do that. But if you wanted to wait on that utility position until the time you adopt the utility budget, that would be prudent as well. My final comment on that, and I received a question from a council member, is when we add another person to the utility, that increases our operations and maintenance expense. And under this proposal, we're looking at a water filtration operator at about $90,000 a year. So when we set our rates, we're looking at 2022 as the base year, and we project forward based on our capital projects. We don't have right now a breakdown of that $90,000 on what it would mean to rates. I'm going to see if I can get that for you when we do the rate study. But typically, we look at the current year and project that forward. Quite honestly, if we were to add one more position, while we're in front of the Public Service Commission now to look at our rates and looking at our costs to run the water utility, we will be going back to the Water Commission within, I would assume, within the next 3 years, once the Clearwell project is in play and we know what the impact of the Clearwell project is, because there's going to be additional operation and maintenance expenses associated with that new project, and how that nets out, it's way too early to tell. But I can assure you that when we submit for that Clearwell's review on our water rate, it'll have, if approved, that extra utility position. So,
So for tonight, in discussion tonight and even to next Tuesday, it'd be your recommendation to hold off on enhancements 15, 15A, 16, and 19, or it'd be more prudent to talk about that when we set the utility budgets in a meeting or two.
correct, and I would just, I'm sorry, Mark. The only one that's being recommended by the city manager is number 19.
Yep, but I just, in terms of even
Yes.
our own,
Yeah.
Okay.
You can certainly ask
Yep.
questions and discuss it, but I don't think until you, I think you want to see the final number so you know what you're getting into.
Yep.
And I think that's only fair to the council.
thank you.
I'd just like to clarify something too. As I recall, in the budget workshops, at the conclusion, council indicated that we weren't really comfortable with going above 4%. And I know there were at least a couple who were like 3.75 or so. With the 4.19 that staff brought back, that obviously exceeds that. And then with the recommendations of the A category, that puts it at 4.66%, I believe, which is, a significant amount, I believe. That's, several $1 million. So just kind of wondering, how those priorities were I guess, decided on the Category A items?
I think you have to take a look at the priorities of public safety and efficiency, and it's a very difficult decision, but I felt that internally, the demand for GIS services is something that benefits all departments. The demands that are being placed on our information technology division have continued to increase. And the GIS, the demand for GIS data was something that I felt was appropriate to, if the council is of the mind and willingness to want to do anything above the 4.19, because I didn't add it to the base budget because I was already uncomfortable at 4.19%, because you were very clear that you wanted in the 3 to 4% range. We tried to do everything we could to do that. The facility maintenance technician is another one that crosses over multiple departments. You'll recall that during the presentation from Mr. Fitzpatrick on behalf of Administrative Services, several other department heads were there to identify the needs for facility maintenance. So again, that's one that stretches across multiple departments. And then finally, the police officers were based on, frankly, the increase, the sad increase in drug overdoses and deaths in our community. And I felt that that is something that needed to be addressed. And it's squeezing the market for drugs and pushing these drug pushers out of town. And the chief needs additional resources to do that. Now, I could give you a very similar impassioned speech on every other enhancement, but the mayor asked why those, that's why those. Every department head is here to discuss other enhancements, and they're certainly prepared to do that. But I felt it was appropriate that those priorities, given their needs and given what we've witnessed in the community, that these are ones that at the top of the list. But again, they're not in the budget right now. And I respect council's role in saying, we want to limit tax growth to a certain amount. And you had some great presentations by members of the public on the enhancements. So, and some of them weren't in the top 3. But you're not necessarily going to get a member of the public coming in saying, I really want to get that facility maintenance tech. But they made some great impassioned pleas for other areas, and that's, it makes it tough for council, and now the decision-making is now with the 7 of you.
The reason I ask that is in the rest of our budget, you know, each of the departments address our priorities through our strategic plan. Council did not see that come with the enhancement request, but just briefly, I was looking at, you know, what category in our strategic plan: quality of life, infrastructure, economic development, strengthening neighborhoods, public safety and health, or effectiveness of government. And as I was trying to assign categories for these, there are several that appear to flow under the effectiveness of government. There are several that cross multiple. They might be both public safety and health, effectiveness of government, and infrastructure. So that's why I ask, because as council had requested previously, when we had this kind of à la carte presented to us, it didn't seem to have that weight to it. So that was my reason for asking. Thank you.
In terms of enhancements, council, do we want to go motion by motion, or do you want to have some broad discussions? I kind of don't know what.
I think we got
Councilmember-
staff here,
Yeah.
we might as well beat them up.
Councilmember Ford.
So I'm comfortable not having an in-depth discussion about it, because I I was fascinated by reading actually in the newspaper that our budget was up in the air. I thought we were pretty dang clear at the last meeting, to be honest. But I think we got to remember, this is a one-year budget and it reflects long-term commitments. So, right, each of these positions is not a one-year position. We're funding these things in perpetuity. We are strong financially, which is a good thing. But I won't go into as much detail on the external context as I did at our last meeting. But we got to be ready for those triple impacts of inflation coming up, right? Everything's coming in over budget. We saw that with the Parks building. That's going to get worse before it gets better. We're taking one of our most valuable tools for freeing up cash off the table, which is refinancing debt, not to mention that debt's going to be more expensive. Add to that third, our residents, right, on a day-to-day life. We have our $150 spread out there, but we got to be honest, everything else is getting more expensive for individuals as well. I mean, that's a real financial burden. As I stated at the last meeting, I can't, in good conscience, increase the financial burden on residents beyond the 4.19% increase that was proposed to us. That was above what we even stated we were comfortable with at the last meeting. I did state in that meeting that I'd be comfortable considering any of these enhancements if we had corresponding savings that were brought to us. None of those were brought to us, so I have nothing to consider, so I can't really change my position there. On the levy-free enhancements, can't fund anything there either, in my opinion, without understanding the impact on utility rates. So I really do appreciate what Director Van Gompel and City Manager Roloff said before, because we need to get that information. I mean, we're at a point here where our enterprise funds, we spend more in our enterprise funds than we do in our operations funds, right? And a lot of this is a function of what's happening at the state-local relationship, and that's not going to get better either, as far as we know. But we have to be honest with that and view this holistically. What's the actual impact of our budget? I know that the levy gets a lot of attention. I know the operating budget gets a lot of attention, but that's just a fraction of what we do, and we're doing more and more things outside of the operating budget. Good, bad, I don't know, but we have to be cognizant of that. On the fund balance stuff, I fully support funding any enhancements with the fund balance. If it's a one-time funding thing, that's totally consistent with our responsibilities or with our policies we passed in the past. As for the enhancements, I mean, I get it. These are all worthy. I said at that first meeting, for me, the DEI coordinator continues to be, I think, essential for the long-term health of our community. There's another discussion to be had there about organizational buy-in, but that's a different discussion. Today, we're here to have a financial discussion. And bottom line, I can't in good conscience increase the financial burden on our residents without having corresponding savings elsewhere. And that's just, to me, the responsible thing to do, looking long-term over what we're going to be facing in the next 3, 4, 5 years. Again, I don't want to sound alarmist. We are in a very strong financial position, and a lot of that is because of the hard work getting our debt under control and other things that have occurred over the last 10, 20 years. But we don't want to go back down that line, getting ourselves back into a difficult situation. And as the finance director stated, he's absolutely right. I mean, this is 100% a function of an absolutely broken relationship between the state and local government when it comes to finance. The state sits on a $5 billion surplus while our property taxes go up. That makes no sense. I can't help but notice we have a few legislative candidates in the audience. You can do one thing when you get to Madison, whoever it is, fix that relationship. I mean, don't think about cost savings as for the state or for the local government. Think about it for the taxpayer. But I digress. I mean, bottom line is, like I said before, I wasn't joking when I said that I was comfortable with a 4% increase. That wasn't a negotiating point. That's what I think our community can handle at this point in time. Doesn't say anything negative about any of these enhancements. I get it. We need it. But it's about what can we afford responsibly. So that's why I'm happy to go through any enhancements, but I think the answer is going to be pretty obvious.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because actually I do see that there is one here that at least I know I requested that we look at the sustainability manager, the request for 1 year. That could potentially be a one-time expense that could be moved into I believe the lower portion of this, no impact on the levy, if it was investigated further as a way to staff that for that 1 year, one time, and it could potentially pay back on itself. So that's one that I see that is also, it goes across at least 4 of our 6 strategic plan goals, and has the potential for addressing some of the needs, not all, of the requests in the DEI coordinator in terms of environmental justice. So I would ask council if we can at least address the sustainability manager piece for those reasons. City manager, is this something that you believe that the East Central Wisconsin Regional Plan Commission might have the capacity for addressing in a work plan as a member at a reduced rate, much like we do our transit improvement plan and transit development plans?
I don't know if East Central has a person of this, with this skill set. We could certainly ask Ms. Kramer-Badke about that. I know they've got some limits on what they can do. There's really two things you can do. One, you can ask that they offer some minor services as part of what is generally paid to East Central by the county. The counties pay into East Central on our behalf. I know the mayor knows this, but for everybody else, the alternative is to contract with East Central, and they would, if they have somebody, they could charge for that service. Those are the two approaches, but I'm not aware that they have anybody with a specific skill set in sustainability, and if that would involve grant writing or not. There's a lot of grant writing that East Central does, I know that, but I don't know if anybody specifically has a skill set in sustainability.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So for this particular topic on enhancement number 6, request sustainability manager, the idea to create a 1-year, I can't imagine the quality of the candidate we would get without knowing that they have long-term job security. Very few people are going to want to walk into a professional role with no job security past 12 months. And while to Councilmember Ford's point, he made it very clear, and I agree wholeheartedly. All of these have merit, and on an individual level, I support many of these requests. But for us to try to sit up here and try to create something on the fly that wasn't put together ahead of time for us to consider, or that's viable, it's, guaranteed viability, I think it's a bit. It's irresponsible for us to try to create something on the fly, to assume that we could get grant funding, to just put something together for a 1-year. I just don't think that we're going to get the quality of the candidate that we deserve without that job security on that type of an idea. So,
And I say that based on what Green Bay has done with a similar position. It was grant funded and covered in the first year and second and into the third. I will admit I don't know what the status is this year, but it's my understanding that that investment did pay for itself and is paying for itself. So I know of at least one community where the 1 year was successful and has been productive and fruitful for that community. Councilmember Erickson.
Thanks. If we can, I'm wondering if we can shift to talk about the DEI coordinator position.
Yes.
So based on what I've heard from the committee and the need for supporting that work, I'm fully supportive of that role, obviously to be accountable to the goals that we've stated, but I'm sensing where things are going with this. Question, city manager, and I'm sorry for not asking this earlier, if that role is not funded, I know that we have some funds set aside for that consultant. Is that just through this year?
We've re-upped funding in the budget, in the human resources budget, for the services of a contract person to continue supporting the DEI committee.
Okay, so that would go through 2023, or?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
And as the equity, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Councilmember
No,
Ford.
this was, I was going to ask you, Madam Mayor. I mean, is that a possible alternative approach? You want-
Incorporating sustainability in the DEI?
No, incorporating a consultant. That's very clear that it's meant to be temporary, one-time funding to aid that committee in obtaining grant.
And you're referring to SAB or DEI?
For SAB. So instead of going down the road of having to create a limited time employment position using fund balance, to try to find somebody who can actually make that actionable, so that we do have a plan, as opposed to having to attract someone to come in here as a full-time job, which, as Deputy Mayor Mugar stated, is going to be a hard ask to do successfully.
Certainly a challenge. I would agree that that is one way of doing it. Another way would be to potentially include some or the other between the DEI coordinator and the SAB manager. While that may sound a bit different than what was requested, it could become, again, an asset in terms of some of the grant writing capacities for both of the intentions there. So, I mean, not to dismiss the hard work that's been done over the years by the DEI coordinator DEI committee or SAB, but it is a big ask considering the situation we're in. So I guess I'd like to know if council would entertain a combination of those two into one in a one-year position, with equity being the main, I guess, driver as the compromise.
I guess I'm unclear. What do you mean by position? Are you saying consulting dollars, or are you saying an
Right.
actual
That's
position?
what Councilmember Ford was
Okay.
asking, was a consulting one-year contract. I believe.
Well, I guess whatever, I don't know if it would be a one-year thing. I mean, I think it would have to be something temporary, and I honestly don't think it needs to be part, and correct me if I'm wrong, City Manager Roloff, but if we're talking about possibly using fund balance for a contract with something, I mean, we have time to flesh that out. The committees, we have time to flesh out what they want and what's viable and what's not. That doesn't need to be part of our operating budget discussion.
Yeah, if the council allocated funds, we would certainly seek out a consultant who could provide that type of service to either of the committees.
Deputy Mayor.
To that point, and I'm going to loop back on one of my previous ones, for us to try to continue to create new things up here on the fly, it's a bit out of our lane, and I hate saying that, because everything should be in our lane. But if that's something that body wants to go down, it doesn't need to belong on our discussion at this time, I don't believe. Especially with, given that City Manager Roloff has a threshold that he can authorize certain things under certain dollar amounts. If that's direction that council wants to give, on another night, to say, we're prepared to support, X amount of dollars for a consultant to do X amount of work, that's something that this body can tell him to do at any time. But to continue to try to fit in something just to get it in, it's a hard no for me tonight.
Councilmember Ford.
Yeah, and just to be clear, Deputy Mayor Mugar, that was exactly my point. This is not something we need to be doing tonight. I mean, I think that if we have an idea, the Sustainability Committee, the DEI Committee has an idea of what they might be looking for a consulting contract, I think it's prudent to work with them and have an actual developed plan put together, not just do it on the fly.
Yeah.
Because yes, we would give something that they probably don't want and that we don't know what it is. And that's no way to make policy. Come on.
And I think the city manager's limits are, is it 25 or 50,000? So this is a considerable amount more than that authorization. But we'll set that aside in the parking lot for the moment to be continued. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'm going to try to move along a little bit here. I move to, sorry guys, but I'd just like to get moving on a few of these, to at least knock off a few that I think we're going to possibly support. I'd move to approval of enhancement number 18, update court plan using fund balance.
Second?
Discussion? Please call the roll on the motion for item number 18, the comprehensive outdoor recreation plan for $30,000.
Hanson,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Mugrower,
Aye.
Palmieri.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Should I keep hitting the button, or should I just keep going?
Go right
Keep
ahead.
going. You're on a
Yeah.
roll.
I move for number 13, Street Memorial Fund, fund balance, EAB remediation, total of $250,000 for using fund balance.
Second?
Discussion?
For those at home, this is about removing more emerald ash borer trees from the terrace. We've gone through a considerable amount throughout the city. We still have a considerable amount left to go. And for a safety issue, it's prudent that those in the right-of-way get taken down. And then, and I know the Parks Department's working on, remediation efforts of backfilling those with a well-diversed tree planting program, so.
Yeah, so just to be clear, it's more than removal, it is replacement.
My apologies. Who seconded the first motion for number 18? You did both?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry.
All right, if there's no further discussion on the EAB remediation, please call the roll.
Hanson,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Mugrower,
Aye.
Palmieri.
Aye.
Carries.
I would like to move discussion on library, number 12, and I'm going to also recommend we change that, amend that to the 82,000 that was requested, I believe during workshop. Mr. Gilderson Dewey and as well Mr. Bracken this evening referenced that change, but I did not see it reflected in the amendment, or I'm sorry, the enhancement request here. Do we have a second on the library request for 82,000?
Second?
Any further discussion? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm trying to find it in the budget book. Russ, can you give me a quick number on where to go for library in here? Do you know? Thank you. I should have asked you.
333?
3 or 2? 233. Thank you very much, sir. My concern comes from previously, there was an allotment, excuse me, there's an expense amount for debt that we had attributed to the finance, excuse me, from finance to the library for projects that the city had taken on their behalf. And it's eerily similar to this 80,000 that's being requested. Finance, can you shed some light on why that 80,000 is no longer there, or why that allotment for debt coverage that was assigned to the library isn't budgeted any longer?
Sure. And I don't have the page in front of me right now, but in the past, up to 2021, the library budget, or the library fund, was paying principal and interest payments for debt for capital projects that benefited the library. And the library is not constantly, but has been in discussions with me as the finance director about the appropriateness of charging the debt for that infrastructure back to the library fund. And after looking at ways of trying to help the library, I have now included that debt portion into the debt levy, so it's no longer being shown as an obligation of the library fund.
Okay.
But it had not been budgeted previously. It had just been, in the last few years, been just assigned or charged to the library fund without a budget.
Okay.
And I think the number's just a coincidence.
No, I know it is a coincidence. I was not, if I inferred anything else, I had no intention of doing that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilmember Miller.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I'm going to dump this on your lap, Mark. I mean, I've been on the council for, what is it, this, on my third year now or something like that, close to that. But I mean, I guess I've been asking staff to put together a memorandum of understanding for the library for years. For everybody at home, we have no control where this money goes once we write the library a check. And that's concerning to me. It's $10.27. It is our fifth largest cost to our levy. It's just a hair under Public Works, and I know they get some state funding and things like that. But it's our fifth largest burden on the levy, and we have no idea what we're writing a check for. I don't think it's a secret that I was not happy that they didn't participate in the compensation study. Why, I have no idea. It just seems like we owe it to the taxpayers not to keep charging them more when we're charging parks $3, street lighting, you know, the list goes on and on and on. And I guess I don't feel comfortable spending all of your taxpayer dollars unless I know where the money's going. So it's the only department that did not take advantage of the compensation study. Why, I have absolutely no idea. But this is significant dollars. And until I understand where the money is going a little bit, and I think the first step for everybody to understand that is a memorandum of understanding between the city and the library. I don't think that's too much to ask for to tell me where our money's going. So I will be voting no on this. Hard no. Thank you.
Other council members, any further discussion on the library? Please call the roll.
Hanson,
No.
Miller,
No.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
No.
Muglauer,
No.
Palmieri,
Aye.
motion fails.
I think we should bring on item number 4, the police department for the addition of 2 police officers. That is one of the category A enhancements. So I move that we discuss the police department, item number 4.
Second.
Discussion. Deputy Mayor.
Chief Smith, would you mind? I apologize, I did not give you a heads up, but I'm pretty sure you can handle it. I'd like to give you an opportunity to remind us about this need, about the why we need it right now.
Well, specific to this request, my ask is that we add to our capabilities for narcotics investigations, clear and simple, to go after the drug dealers that are impacting our community. We know that our overdose deaths are up. We know that our seizures of drugs are up. Those are the drugs that we have able to find. Through August of this year, 2 investigators seized $730,000 worth of narcotics. We've seized enough fentanyl to kill 48,000 people, I believe the number is. And we have emerging drugs that are coming in. Absent fentanyl, absent Narcan with our officers and with our fire department, our overdose deaths probably, I would assume, would be double, based upon how many Narcan doses that we've been providing out to members of our community. And another piece that we don't capture that we don't have the ability to do so is because Narcan is being freely given through health department, as drug dealers are also providing Narcan to some of their users. Our users have their own Narcan. So we really can't capture those overdoses that never get reported. So that's an empty number that I don't have. But specifically, I know that as a community, we have a drug problem, and we have to address the problem.
And this is about going after, I guess, boiling it down, this is about going after dealers. This is about making it very difficult to do business in the city of Oshkosh and trying to hold the line and even improve our quality of life by making it very difficult.
That's absolutely correct. We know that we have methamphetamine coming in from Minnesota. We know we have methamphetamine coming in from Chicago, coming up from Milwaukee. We also have data that shows where it's actually originating from in the cartels in Mexico. And we are on the I-41 corridor where drugs travel through the city. They also travel up to Green Bay. We have users that are going down into Milwaukee and they're buying drugs and they're selling drugs in our community with no care in order to fund their own addictions as well. Anecdotally, we know this is occurring from investigations that we have going on. And we have emerging drug trends coming on right now where we have knockoff pills that are being sold now on the black market and dark web, and where they're disguised as Adderall, but they're actually fentanyl. And a couple doses of fentanyl, a couple grams of fentanyl will kill you.
Thank you, Chief.
Chief, speaking of fentanyl, do we currently use the fentanyl test strips, or is that a resource that's available here in the community to prevent some of those deaths?
We, as in the police department?
Yes.
No. We have other testing material to use for that. Fentanyl test strips are primarily a one-off for somebody who, frankly, if they can test their own drugs that they buy illegally and see if they're laced with fentanyl. And they're not 100% accurate. It's just an indicator.
Council received an email regarding the overdose fatality review, some recommendations and requests that had been made regarding having some specific officer participation with the Navigator Roundtable and the participation in the peer response team, as well as offering training to OPD staff. And I'm wondering how you view that in conjunction with the request for these 2 officers that address the supply end of things versus the use or the other end of this, let's see, from the Winnebago County Overdose Fatality Review Group.
We're actually a part of that group. We have officers that we bring our fatalities to that group. The work that they speak of, and if I can give a slight adjustment there, the training that they're talking about is for other city employees. They actually delineate that the police department already has received that training.
Okay, I did not read it
However,
that way.
a part of these groups are for the users and for those who are suffering in addiction. We absolutely support that. We want to be a part of that, and whatever we can do to help our user community to get out of addiction, we need to be a part of that as best as we can. Staffing's tight for us. We already contribute to the overdose fatality review team through our staff that we provide for the review of all of our overdoses. We also have our law enforcement addiction assistance program, where we give amnesty to any user who wants help, where we can give a warm handoff to navigators who can take them and deliver them to services that they need. We do a lot of work right now for our users. They're not our focus. Our focus is trying to stop the dealers.
And I'm sorry, I read this differently, but it does appear that the individual spoke of reaching out and brainstorming, and those were the outcomes in working with you?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Miller?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to drive Ford absolutely nuts. I don't think it's a secret that I'm the biggest cop supporter. I shouldn't say that. I mean, I'm a huge cop supporter. And I'm going to talk out of both sides of my mouth. Chief, I think you've done a great job explaining us the need for this position, probably not picking on any other department head or person, but you've done an amazing job of explaining the importance of this and literally the war on this this killer. What 48,000 people you arrested, or not 48,000 people, but the drugs could have killed 48,000 people. Is that?
We've seized enough fentanyl just with the city to kill 48,000 people in the community. That doesn't include what the Meg unit has seized, which will kill hundreds of thousands of people based upon the amount of fentanyl that they've seized this year.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk out of both sides of my mouth. I was pretty strong about this, not increasing this, but I would like to amend this to fill a half a position, make it amendment to fill half of this position, in hopes that I can plead with my colleague down at the end to support this. I think I was given a stat today of 42 drug overdose fatalities in the county so far this year. Does that sound accurate? Sorry, I'm throwing you under the bus.
I can get that number for you later. I just don't have.
No, but
it
it's just, I feel pretty confident that that's an accurate number, so. But I would like to make an amendment that we change this to half a position.
So a single instead of the two.
Right now, it's two for half.
Two for
Two for half the year, so, yes, one position total overall.
For a whole year or half a year?
Chief, it's gonna take you 6 months to hire this person, isn't it?
Yes, it will.
Yeah, so we'll add it's accurate though, half a person then? Can you saw a cop in half?
No.
To clarify, one position, 6 months.
Exactly. Thanks, Matt. Much better said than myself.
So, being the guy with the numbers.
They need a second. That's an amendment offered. I just.
All right,
and I-
discussion.
And I don't ask for that, but sorry, Mayor.
Thanks,
There's
Mayor.
a second by Councilmember Hanson.
I just wanted to.
I think we're just all trying to follow along, and I'm looking at budget impact and numbers.
I'm throwing a monkey wrench in, and I'm sorry.
No, we can deal with it. So I just want to clarify. So if you say one position for a half a year, that's basically $52,000 is your amendment. I just want to clarify.
And as always, you're much smarter than me, so thank you.
Comments on this?
Councilmember Ford?
Yeah, I'll just say, right, our public safety budget's up 300% since 1990. It's over half our expenditures. It's easy to be fiscally conservative when you're campaigning, but bottom line is, if you're going to be fiscally conservative, you can't ignore the largest chunk of our budget. That's just a fact. So that's where I'm at, and that's why I'm going to be consistent with what I stated earlier.
And I'll say, I got the impression after following up with a discussion with the chief that, I asked if this was effective or useful to propose one, or if it was all or nothing. And the way I understood it was that one really wouldn't work very well without the other. So I'm not sure I'm following with the half a person for half a year and how that works logistically. But it's certainly one of the top issues among many that are on many of our minds, and I did pull up the annual 2021-2022 OFR report, and it was at the end of 21, there were 41 overdose deaths
No.
at the end of 21. So I think, were you referring to something more recent than that? I hadn't seen that data.
Thanks for checking, Mayor.
No, I'm just asking, is there something else that's
No, I
more
think that's
current? Okay,
probably the-
Okay, I just want to make sure. I thought that I had heard something, but not having it in front of me. Any further discussion on Councilmember Miller's motion for one position for half a year in the amount of $52,000? Please call the roll.
Hanson? Aye. Miller?
Aye.
Erickson?
No.
Ford?
Nope.
Mugrower?
No.
Palmieri?
No.
Motion fails.
Back to the original.
Back to the original enhancement request of 2 police officers, starting half in July of '23 for the amount of $104,000. Councilmember Ford?
Yeah, I mean, I think you all know where I'm at on this and why, but I do want to just make a couple of comments. If you know me, and you know my wife, she's dedicated her life professionally to helping people with addiction. And, I try to stay calm with this stuff, but, it's around our dinner table. This is what we talk about. And I think it's important that the community understands that Narcan is not some, you're not giving it to a drug user so they can have fun, not be accountable. People that are in the throes of addiction, that's a living hell. I mean, that's about as low as you can get. Nobody wants to be in that position. Narcan is simply a tool to keep people alive until they can get help. So I understand the enforcement piece has to be part of this, right? We need to get those dealers, but I really hope, whether this passes tonight or not, when we continue to go down this road, we got to make sure that we're not in our silos, that people are talking to each other, because if we are not working on the dealing with the addiction piece, we're really not getting at the heart of the problem. And I know that it's personal to me. But I think we ought to flood the streets with Narcan. There ought to be Narcan in every single public vehicle. You never know, what can come of that life that you save there. So this is not recreational drug users. These are not the kids getting stoned on the corner in high school. Oh God, my kid's gonna be in high school next year. Hope he's not listening. Right? We're dealing with people at their lowest point. So I understand from a police standpoint why. Yeah, you got to go after the dealers, and that matters, but we have to pair that with more. So that's all I got to say.
Councilmember Erickson?
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I wholeheartedly agree. As in my day job, I have had the experience of training people on Narcan, giving out fentanyl test strips, meeting with people who are experiencing addiction, and this is complicated. This is not just about, supply and demand. This is about the disease of addiction. And I'm afraid that if we focus on only one end of it, it's a constant game of whack-a-mole. And I hope that we can look at the broader picture of how we're aligning our efforts across this entire spectrum, what our role is as a city to address this problem and meet people where they're at. Yeah, I'll end there. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My 2 colleagues put it very well. I won't even try to add on to that at all, just that I couldn't agree more with exactly how you said it. It's complicated. It is not easy. I come back to what's within our purview, what's within our jurisdiction to attempt to impact change. And there are things that are within the county's perspective that I hope and support that those efforts are expanded and doubled and well thought out and going after and supporting those who need those resources. And I come back to that with our form of government and within our budget and within our jurisdiction and our authority over the city manager, Oshkosh Police Department and their efforts are absolutely within our jurisdiction to try to impact change. And your comment about whack-a-mole may be exactly right. It's probably pretty accurate, unfortunately. But I'll play that game. I'd much rather put the quarter in that slot and continue to try to get them all than to not try in this aspect for me. So I appreciate Councilmember Miller's attempt to try to gain some more support to get even just one. I'm hopeful we have support for two. I think the community needs these efforts. I'll leave it there.
Well, again, I'm looking at the recommendations that came out of the OFR report. They list access to treatment for priorities. They list increased support for medical providers. They list improved response to changes in drug trends and supporting children and preventing early substance use. I don't know how many of you have ever watched a close loved one overdose on opiates, 10 fentanyl patches across their chests. It took 3 rounds of Narcan to bring them back around. It's not a pleasant experience, that's an understatement. This is really difficult because it is a disease model. And, you know, while we can talk about good guys and bad guys in this, there have been a lot of resources put into this fatality review report and recommendations. And that was done by the county, and some of the partners are the police department. My first inclination was to make a recommendation for one additional narcotics officer, because that is part of the circus and merry-go-round that is addiction and this disease and this scourge that's killing too many of our folks. After having talked to the chief, it sounded as if it really wouldn't work for one. And then we had the amendment offered for half a position. I'm really struggling on this. I don't think I can support both positions based on the other recommendations that have been made in the community. I would be willing to support one. Deputy Mayor.
Just for clarification, that's what Councilmember Miller put forward.
No, he put forward half a position, one position at half a year.
But it typically takes about 6 months to hire a cop, so if he doesn't hire him till June, that would become one full position after that.
But originally, if I recall, it was 2 full positions for full years for $200,000+. So what's before us now is 104, but you offered 52, which was half of that.
Correct,
So-
but the dollars wouldn't flow until we hired them, so if Dean hires somebody in June, that's just basically a half a year. So then the following year, that person will be here a full year, and the money would become a
I see.
full-time
Gotcha.
position.
You're talking about after the first year. Okay, thank you. Councilmember Hanson.
Thank you. Can I just say this is really difficult? Narcan has always been used at every single festival I've gone to, and it helps lives everywhere, all over the country, all over the world. these two officer positions would really bring it home for Oshkosh, and I don't know how we can find a healthy medium. The price versus the need of the officers, we need the officers, but I can't, how do we get to a medium, guys? Help. Is there any way?
Councilmember Ford.
I could be broken record because this is the third meeting in a row I'm saying it, but if we had options in front of us about reprioritizing savings elsewhere, those are trade-offs we could consider. We don't have those, so I can't consider them.
And again, I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. Mike, I understand 100% your position. And I respect it. And I think that's a challenge to Mark and staff. But just personally, I just can't let this go. So, Mayor, if you're happy with one full-time position, if you choose to make an amendment, I will be supporting two officers because my one officer failed, but I will be supporting two full-time officers when it gets around to that vote. Thank you very much. You got any buddies that want to be cops?
No, I think Russ did, but I was just holding.
Oh, yes.
Throw us a lifeline, Russ.
I'm trying, and from a financial position, I normally wouldn't do this, but I've had a conversation, and I would just like to call your attention back to when we had our discussion on the levy increase for debt. And one of the options to consider, if you're looking for a way of minimizing this for 2023, a one-year thing, the solution could be available if you want to pursue it, is up to you, of taking more money out of fund balance to offset this $104,000. It's just an option, and I'm just trying to tell you that normally I wouldn't do that for a position, but we're talking about a one-year starting of it, and if you're looking for a way of holding the line on property taxes, that might be something you might want to consider.
Do you want to use it for debt service, right? And then
We
free it up?
we would reduce the debt service levy, let's just say $104,000. So the levy goes down by $104,000, but the downside to that is you're making a commitment for a position in 2024 and beyond. I'm trying to offer you a solution as it impacts the 2023 levy. Again, that is a political and legislative decision. I'm only offering it as something you might want to think about.
I think we're at a point where we need to call the roll on the two officers as proposed. If there's no further discussion. All right.
I'm sorry. Hanson,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Erickson,
No.
Ford,
Nope.
Mugrower,
Aye.
Palmieri.
No.
Motion fails.
Deputy Mayor.
I'm going to move for enhancement number 2, add new GIS position, 80,300.
Second. Any discussion on the new GIS position in information technology? Just if I could, City manager, this position was going to be shared across departments, correct? As the rest of IT is?
Yes, this is shared across multiple departments.
Does anyone have questions, discussion?
Mr. Newman and Mr. Fitzpatrick can answer these
I don't know if
questions.
there's any questions. Nope. All right, we'll call the roll.
Just for clarification, this is for the 80,300.
Yes.
Hanson,
Aye.
Miller,
No.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
No.
Mugrower,
Aye.
Palmieri,
Aye.
carries.
Deputy Mayor.
Move for enhancement number 3, facilities maintenance tech, 21,300.
Do we have a second?
Second?
Discussion?
Actually, if you wouldn't mind.
Oh, sure.
Just a
Go
very
ahead.
brief. 5 years on council, I've never seen that many department heads show up to support another department as much as, actually, the last two, really, the GIS and maintenance tech, but just the departments are showing up to support each other in terms of the needs amongst all these departments. So just between those last two, the GIS and tech, I appreciate that the departments are looking out for each other and saying, we have common needs and common goals, and this is the way we can go about getting there. And that's why I'm supporting it. And we've also put a high priority with the city manager on our facilities. That's the reason we completed a study. It's the reason we're putting so much funding, even just in '23's budget, towards our own facility needs. And we've got to maintain them. We can't just invest and expect them to stay nice and stay up to date and stay relevant and stay functional. And this is a way to help with that. So that's why I'll support it.
And I agree with Deputy Mayor on that, on both of these positions, that there was cross or interdepartmental support. It would have been nice had some of that maybe occurred with some of these other items. So I'll be supporting this one. All right, please call the roll.
Hanson,
Aye.
Miller,
No.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
No.
Mugrower,
Aye.
Palmieri,
Aye.
carries.
All right, if I could just pause for a moment. Based on the items that have been carried, can we have a cumulative impact on the rate from those items so far?
Yes, Madam Mayor, if you look at the enhancement sheet that was provided in your council packet,
Yes.
the impact so far on levy items is, as I understand it, with those two motions for items 2 and 3, would bring the levy to 4.42% with a proposed mill rate of $12.09.
Okay, thank you. I did see that. I didn't realize it was flowing in that direction, so thank you.
No problem.
All right. Deputy Mayor.
I'll move for enhancement number 8 under the no impact to levy. This is the facilities project coordinator, 97,100. Silence.
Second.
I was getting ready to say it was gonna, all right. So discussion on facility maintenance tech, Councilmember Ford.
Yeah, Director Van Gompel, can you explain the funding?
Sure. The reason this is not impacting the levy is we would account for this in what we call our capital projects fund. Most of the costs associated with this would be charged out to specific capital projects that the coordinator would be working on. We have to provide a home base, so to speak, for the allocation of cost. Right now, my proposal with this budget package would be that it would be accounted for in what's called a special assessment fund, which is another capital project. That is the project that carries the special assessments. There is one other clerical position that's in this fund. So it's being reported to you in the second box with no impact on the levy, because we really aren't going to put levy dollars towards this position. This position would get charged out to whatever capital projects they're working on with its home base, so to speak, in that special assessment construction or capital project fund.
So if I'm understanding cash flows correctly, we have a capital improvement, right, in our budget that, or right, a new piece of capital, we're taking out general obligation debt to fund it. This individual's working on those projects, so that time gets charged back.
It's a lot
the
like,
capital.
we have internally chargebacks for engineers that work on capital projects. Those engineers aren't, in reality, funded by levy dollars, they're funded by the project dollars. So it'd be similar to that.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for asking that question, Councilmember Ford. So in full transparency, Councilmember Ford and I have spoken on this particular topic, and I'll be honest, at the outset of the suggestion, it threw up a red flag-ish for me that we're going to fund a position with debt. That's it, at its core, that's what it boils down to. Thing is, if we were paying a consultant to do this as part of these projects, we wouldn't be paying cash. We'd be using project funds in a very similar manner. It would, accounting-wise, it would be slightly different, but very similar, that we're paying a professional to handle the duties, to manage the project, like we do on many of our stormwater, sanitary sewer projects. We've got consultants that do that every day for us.
And another analogy would be our recent additions to facilities like the Public Works Administration Building and currently our Parks Administration Building, where we have outside construction or contracted services to kind of do the project management for that.
So initially, it definitely screamed at me like, why are we doing this? As I thought more about it, as I've got more information, this is the way it works. This is not uncommon. And that's why I'll support this one as well. We've made a commitment to improving our facilities, and this is about managing that process for the next, well, roughly decade if council's plan goes forward.
Anyone else? All right, please call the roll on enhancement number 8.
Hanson,
Aye.
Miller,
No.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Mugrower,
Aye.
Palmieri,
No.
carried.
Deputy Mayor, I'm gonna, if you can hold that for 1 minute.
Yep, you already have.
Hold the council. We're beyond the 2 hours. Like to see if the council would like to take a bio break here for a couple of minutes.
I say we're on a roll. Let's keep going.
Probably should only be a little bit in my thoughts.
Doesn't matter to me, whatever.
Well, how about this? I'm going to call a bio break. 5 minutes.
There we go.
Fair enough.
The Oshkosh Common Council is currently in a break. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. This is GovTV, opening accessibility and understanding of local government, helping you to be informed and involved. Also streaming live and on demand at oshkoshmedia.org and radio simulcast on Oshkosh FM 101.9. Like us on Facebook at our Oshkosh Media page. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. Please stay with us. Coverage will resume shortly. The Oshkosh Common Council is currently in a break. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. This is GovTV, opening accessibility and understanding of local government, helping you to be informed and involved. Also streaming live and on demand at oshkoshmedia.org and radio simulcast on Oshkosh FM 101.9. Like us on Facebook at our Oshkosh Media page. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. Please stay with us. Coverage will resume shortly. The Oshkosh Common Council is currently in a break. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. This is GovTV, opening accessibility and understanding of local government, helping you to be informed and involved. Also streaming live and on demand at oshkoshmedia.org and radio simulcast on Oshkosh FM 101.9. Like us on Facebook at our Oshkosh Media page. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. Please stay with us. Coverage will resume shortly. The Oshkosh Common Council is currently in a break. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. This is GovTV, opening accessibility and understanding of local government, helping you to be informed and involved. Also streaming live and on demand at oshkoshmedia.org and radio simulcast on Oshkosh FM 101.9. Like us on Facebook at our Oshkosh Media page. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. Please stay with us. Coverage will resume shortly. The Oshkosh Common Council is currently in a break. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. This is GovTV, opening accessibility and understanding of local government, helping you to be informed and involved. Also streaming live and on demand at oshkoshmedia.org and radio simulcast on Oshkosh FM 101.9. Like us on Facebook at our Oshkosh Media page. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. Please stay with us. Coverage will resume shortly. The Oshkosh Common Council is currently in a break. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. This is GovTV, opening accessibility and understanding of local government, helping you to be informed and involved. Also streaming live and on demand at oshkoshmedia.org and radio simulcast on Oshkosh FM 101.9. Like us on Facebook at our Oshkosh Media page. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. Please stay with us. Coverage will resume shortly. The Oshkosh Common Council is currently in a break. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. This is GovTV, opening accessibility and understanding of local government, helping you to be informed and involved. Also streaming live and on demand at oshkoshmedia.org and radio simulcast on Oshkosh FM 101.9. Like us on Facebook at our Oshkosh Media page. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. Please stay with us. Coverage will resume shortly. The Oshkosh Common Council is currently in a break. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. This is GovTV, opening accessibility and understanding of local government, helping you to be informed and involved. Also streaming live and on demand at oshkoshmedia.org and radio simulcast on Oshkosh FM 101.9. Like us on Facebook at our Oshkosh Media page. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. Please stay with us. Coverage will resume shortly.
All right, we're reconvening here at 7:20. We're all here. Councilmember Ford.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to reconsider the consideration of one officer position of the two requested.
I'll second that.
Discussion. Councilmember Ford.
Have to come from somebody who is on
No,
prevailing?
just one.
I'm sorry. Let me ask the clerk, would you reread the motion as was previously entered, or I'm sorry, offered?
So the previous one or right now?
The one that's being motion for reconsider?
Motion to reconsider the motion to approve enhancement number 4 at 50%, one police department officer, effective 7/1/23 at $52,000.
Okay, thank you. Just so we're clear. All right, discussion. Councilmember Ford.
Yeah, I haven't changed my mind, but I had the distinct impression that the majority opinion may not have been fully stated on that vote, based on the discussion afterwards. So happy to bring that back to the table.
Thanks, Blake.
So the first vote is just whether or not to agree to reconsider, not whether or not you're
Right,
yes or no.
and we have the second. So call the roll on the motion to reconsider.
Hanson,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Mugrower,
Aye.
Palmieri,
Aye.
carried.
All right. So,
Do I need to make the?
No, that motion had been prior made, so the reconsidering, it's on the floor
It's
now.
on the
Perfect,
floor
thank
now.
you.
As if
Yep.
you'd already made the motion.
So we can just call the roll?
is there any further discussion as to why we're reconsidering it? Go ahead, Councilmember Miller.
So, yeah, and I apologize, I didn't make it clear to my colleagues up here that basically, the reason I wanted half a position wasn't that I was going to saw this young officer in half over here, was that it would be a full position for just half of this year, basically starting in June. So my apologies for not making that clear.
And if I may ask the finance manager, so the amount that we have listed here for two officers at half a year, the 104, so this would actually be 52,000, correct?
That's my understanding of the motion that's on the table, yes.
All right, okay. All right, anybody else? Discussion? All right, please call the roll on the reconsidered motion.
I'm sorry, I need a motion and a second.
Oh, I thought you didn't need it if it was on the table.
Oh, it's
We-
good, okay.
We
I'm
already
sorry.
have it on, yep.
All right. Hanson,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Erickson,
No.
Ford,
No.
Mugrower,
Aye.
Palmieri,
Aye.
carried.
Deputy Mayor, can I ask you to pause for just one moment? I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
I just want to make sure other council members have a chance to call out items that they would like to have considered. Nobody else? All right.
Oh, so you want?
Trying to rotate so everybody has a
No,
chance to
that's fine.
introduce.
So, James, can you hop up here? I know you're in a hurry to get to your conference. I'm teasing you.
Is there a specific item,
Yeah,
Councilmember Miller?
it's number 19, and I want to make sure, because we're getting tossed around, so, the water filtration operator, and again, Mike's gonna start calling me a slimy politician tomorrow, but, you guys did a great job of explaining this position. This position we're adding is the guys that are working 2 weekends a month, right? And then they can rotate to a third shift. It's the miserable shift job. Is that accurate?
Yes, it is the 24/7, 365 operation of the water filtration plant. And as you indicated, yes, they do work 2 weekends a month, spend a week straight on either second or third shift at some point during their monthly cycle.
Okay, all right. You explained that much better than I did. So I would like to vote on enhancement number 19, water filtration operator.
I'll second it for discussion.
Thank you.
All right, discussion. Deputy Mayor?
He hit
I'm
the
sorry,
button.
Councilmember Ford, then Deputy Mayor.
No, it's a worthy cause. I think as we discussed earlier, I'm not comfortable voting on something I don't understand what the fiscal impact's going to be, and I fully support what the finance director and city manager offered earlier to actually bring us what the real impact on ratepayers is going to be for this position before we vote for it. I just don't think it's reasonable to vote for something if we don't know what it's going to do.
I have to agree with Councilmember Ford on this. Those are the notes that I made because we don't know those impacts yet and won't until the end of the year. You know, I'll say now what I said at a previous meeting, you know, that the impact on the Clearwell and the ratepayers is still up in the air, and it seems to be potentially significant. And we still don't know whether or not we can even consider a basic hygiene rate. So,
Yeah.
Deputy Mayor.
Councilmember Ford put it perfectly. I anticipate supporting this enhancement upon presentation of that information. Having been through there, I can't say I appreciate it because I don't do the role and I don't do the hours, but I can see how this is absolutely needed for the operation of that facility. But it's completely prudent and practical and reasonable to expect to also be provided the information to know the impact so that we're making a well-educated decision and not just a blind one. So I support the position, but at this time, I'm going to vote no to Councilmember Miller's request.
Councilmember Miller.
Thank you, Mayor. James, what does the schedule look like if we lose one of these people because of the workload? Walk us through what happens if an existing person says, I got a better gig at a surface water deal and
The rest of the staff are really stepping up and covering those roles. We've been there throughout the course of this summer. We were at a point where we were down 2 out of those 6 operators. So the rest of the operators are picking up extra shifts. The maintenance staff are picking up operator shifts, so then they're not doing their maintenance activities at the plant. So while it's able to be covered through overtime and deferred maintenance, those have significant costs to us as well.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Any further discussion on, this is item number 19, water filtration operator.
If we vote no right now, that doesn't mean we're shutting it down. It just means we're waiting for more information.
That's my understanding. Councilmember Miller.
Thank you, Mayor. And I want to reiterate that I agree wholeheartedly with my colleagues. I probably just did a smidge more legwork. I understand you don't want to vote and the reasons why you don't want to vote for that, and I respect that totally, but I just feel very passionate that we're killing these people in this position, working 2 weekends a month. I don't want a gig that I gotta do that. So that's all, but I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Councilmember Erickson.
City Manager, Finance Director, could you remind me, did you say you'd have more information for us likely the second meeting in November on this? Or what was the timeline for that?
I'll put him on the spot to answer that
That's
question.
okay. I think the comments that I made earlier in the meeting was that we were going to defer bringing this forward until we look at the rest of our rates and the budget for the utilities. I thought I said that I am hopeful I can get you an impact on that particular position when we do that. We actually will rely on Ellers and Associates to complete the rate analysis and ask them to add this position into it. I'm not sure if I can get that at the same time. So you have this legislative decision on whether or not you want to authorize a position now or wait until we give you the rest of the information. I'm hopeful I can present that, but I can't guarantee it.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor and then Councilmember Miller.
Just a point of clarification from the city clerk, because we just turned down a motion, we just shot down a motion, and now we're probably following the proper procedure to reconsider it. Given the rules that we operate under, we vote this thing down now in 2 meetings or 3 meetings. If we would like to then put it on the table, are we out of order and unable to do so? Because if so.
Can I head you off at the pass? I'm going to withdraw.
I was going to offer to later.
Okay.
No, I'm going to withdraw my motion to save us all a lot of grief, so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. And I'm pretty certain it's the very next meeting, based on previous experience on motions for reconsideration. All right, Councilmember Miller has
Officially, yeah, he's got to withdraw,
withdrawn.
but we need the second.
but we need the second withdrawn.
Sorry.
I think it was Matt.
Was it? Then I withdraw as well. I totally
That was
forgot. My apologies.
Okay, that motion for number 19 is withdrawn for now.
And then with that being said, Mayor, I'd like to add, and I've got so many notes here, have we, the prescription safety glasses, are we good on that?
We have not.
Okay, so
Has
I'd like
not-
to bring number 7 forward, prescription safety glasses, please. And then Russ, if you could explain to us the funding on this.
We need a second
Oh,
first.
Sorry, Mayor, sorry.
Second,
All right,
Thank
now
you.
discussion.
all
All
going.
right, just trying to keep it straight. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm just trying to wait for everybody to weigh in. So the budget amendment, as recommended by the city manager, has been modified to $15,000. It's now in the box that does not impact the tax levy. And the reason with that being is we account for our health insurance costs and some other related employment type activities in what's called an internal service fund that we talked about a little bit during the workshop. There's one specifically set up for employee benefits. And that fund, this $15,000, if the entire amount gets used and we're not sure it's going to get used, will come out of the fund balance of that individual fund and not impact the tax levy.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on prescription safety glasses? Please call the roll.
Hanson,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Mugurar,
Aye.
Palmieri,
Aye.
carries.
Can I just ask a quick question, Mr. Van Gompel? On item number 9, or Mr. Roloff, can you remind me what department that office assistant request was for?
Sure, and I think Mr. Robbie might come up to help out. I did also receive a question after our last meeting on this particular position. The position is right now a part-time position. Basically in our central garage, again, it's an internal service fund. The question that I received
Initially, this position was shown as being impacted through the levy. The $16,300 is to take a person from 0.6 FTEs to 1 FTE. And the question that I received is, some of that cost will be allocated to utility-based customers through the water, sewer, stormwater fund. About $10,900 will be impacting the levy. So the impact on the levy, if this were to go through, would be $10,900.
I believe that sounds about right. It was about 60, about two-thirds.
And that particular impact of $10,900 is less than 1 cent. It's like 0.2877 cents on the mill rate. And I do have that calculation, but I did not distribute that with council because I'm not sure where that potential approval would land. So I have the numbers here if there's any.
I guess my question is if that's a half-time, to take from half-time to full-time, does that mean we're actually paying someone $32,600, that small of a salary?
The going from 6/10 to full-time, the differential is
That's the
16.3.
incremental cost, so that would the 16.3 would represent about 40%.
We already have planned to distribute and allocate that base salary, which I don't have in front of me. for that
You said we're going from two-thirds of a position, six.
Oh,
6/10.
I'm
We're going
sorry.
from 6/10 to 1.
Okay,
The
so
full
not
cost would be about
half-time. When you said
40,000.
part-time, it's not half-time, it's 6/10. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
All right.
Can you explain, James, and I'm sorry, I hate to throw you under the bus like this, but can you explain what that's going to do and how that's going to impact the department a little bit?
Yeah, what this position increase would do is it would provide us in our fleet management internal service fund some additional administrative support to take some of that administrative duties burden off of our other mechanics division coordinator and our mechanics manager and allow them to continue to focus on other duties. For example, the mechanics manager is responsible for working with all of the departments to prepare specifications for bidding of equipment, vehicles in particular. So that does take up a lot of his time. So getting this administrative support to full-time would free up some of his time to continue to provide that service to all of the other departments within the city.
All right, it doesn't appear we have any other questions. Please call the roll on item number, I'm sorry,
were just
that was not
questions,
motion.
yeah.
These were just questions. My apologies. Councilmember Miller, did you want to make a motion on an item? I just wanted to answer the question of the department, so.
So, this is, I'm multitasking, which everybody knows I'm not capable of. But, so this affects, this does not affect, this is operating, this does not, how is
These
it
are
getting
up-
funded today? I'm sorry.
Most of it's getting funded out of this internal service fund, about which, what did Russ say, about two-thirds of it, or James said, two-thirds of it's already getting funded out of the general fund. So this additional 16,300 would have a levy impact of 10,900.
What was throwing me off is how dumb I am. I was going to say, why is this minus 16,000, but that's just a dash mark from my pen. So, yes. Yes, I will make a motion on number 9. Thank you.
Second.
All right, any other discussion on that item number 9? Councilmember Ford?
Yeah, I guess I don't want to be a jerk, maybe I will be, but can you explain why it's listed under no impact on the levy for us and for the public when there is an impact on the levy?
Well, again, the issue is the $16,300 is the uptick in the cost for the position itself. The question that was raised in between was,
of that, how much would get charged back to the general fund and how much of that gets back to other utilities? Because this internal service fund, along with the mechanics and everything else, gets allocated to whoever uses the services. So actually, it started out as impacting a levy. When we talked about it, we moved it down to the bottom box because it's really funding out of that internal service fund. But in response to the question that I received, about 2/3 of that gets charged back to the general fund anyway. So the departments within the general fund, and the general fund would be basically responsible for 10,000 of the 16,000. So I think it's 10,000 of it should be accurately portrayed in the area that impacts the levy.
Okay, thank you.
Just trying to be transparent, and it was a great question. I don't know who, Russ didn't tell me who asked it, but whoever asked it, it was a great question. Apparently, it wasn't you, Mr. Ford, because you're asking questions about the question, but.
No, it was a
it's
question
legit
I
issue.
asked, but it's a question that I think the community needs to
Oh,
hold.
okay,
Honestly,
yeah.
if I seem in a bad mood tonight, it's because
It's
we
full
need to.
disclosure.
We need to be as transparent as possible in
Yeah.
the budgetary process, and I'm struggling with that tonight.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Thank you.
You're struggling because you're right.
And I'm struggling because in talking to some of our peers in other communities, the enhancement kind of process that I described, they are completely unfamiliar with. They're presented with these things in consideration of the balanced budget with the direction given. So it is rather frustrating, and I feel like, we're almost repeating part of the two-day process that the council made time for by, I don't know, re-lobbying for each one. Councilmember Miller.
Thank you, Mayor. I understand my colleagues' frustrations, and Mike's sticking to his gun because he's an honorable guy and everything, and that's why he's frustrated. But I want to be clear that I probably did more digging after we dug in our heels on any of this stuff, and I've probably talked to more people, staff, department heads and things, and did my own research, and I truly believe these positions are necessary, as does the rest of the council. I just dug into what needed to happen, or in my opinion, and the positions that need to be filled today. And I respect that the rest of my colleagues need better explanations and more clarity. But this is a position I can easily support. I think it's going to be helpful and not cost taxpayers too much money. So, thank you.
All right, again, we are on item number 9, coming from an internal service fund, office assistant, partial recommendation category A. So if there's no further discussion, please call the roll on item 9.
Hanson,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
No.
Mugrower,
No.
Palmieri,
No.
motion fails.
Actually, would Transportation Director Collins mind coming on up? I have a question. I'm not going to put it on the table yet, but I have a question regarding management analyst for the transit department. You've obviously been listening. You probably know. We want to know the impact. And it's really hard, and I acknowledge that in some of these cases, it's very hard to give us that, yet I'm going to expect it anyways. I should and I need to. If this was something that's granted to, or given or approved, I should say, I shouldn't use those words, approved, what kind of impact can we expect within the transit budget? Is it, in this case, would it go straight, it's not going straight to levy, it's saying here. So will you talk to us about the impact within the ridership and your budget that you will manage?
Yeah, it's not going to impact the levy at all because, for a number of reasons. Well, number one, we are federally and state funded between 50 and 60%, right? And then fares make up about 20% of our budget. The local levy makes up 20% of our budget. However, the city for the last 3-4 years at least has held our levy flat, and that's what's proposed again this year. So by doing that, basically what you're telling us is that we have to figure it out within our operating budget to stay within that levy. So with this position, I'm saying we're not going to increase the levy at all. I'll figure out a way to make it so we'll still be within budget. But a couple other impacts this has is, one, the way that transit funding works in the state is that all the systems get equal. So whatever our expenses are, so say we spend $1 million, we get anywhere from 53 to 60% of that federally and state funded, right? So if any of our peers, Appleton, whatever, Eau Claire, La Crosse, if they add a position, that just goes into the total and they get another 50-some% of that position. So by being fiscally responsible for a number of years, we have not added any extra costs, but our other systems have, and so they get that money that we don't. So in certain ways, we're doing a disservice by not getting what we need as far as our staff and our operating costs covered. For instance, I looked at our peers in Appleton, for example. They have a bigger system, but between myself and our transit operations manager, they have about 5 people doing the job that we got 2 people doing, plus our other duties. Same thing for La Crosse. They have at least 3 people doing the job that we have 1.5 doing. So I can assure you that if we get this position, what it's going to do is it's going to help us. We have $8 million in grants that are active right now. We have no capability to apply for any additional grants, number one. There are some available, but we can't manage them. We can barely manage what we have. So this position will help us, A, potentially apply for additional grants. B, it'll help us manage the grants we already have, which we're really struggling with. And then C, with the issues we've had, we talked about with the school board last week, that's really drained some of our resources. So our operations manager, for our grants, it's basically he and I that do all that $8 million in grants that we're at a point where we can't take on anymore. And we need to focus more resources on that school program. If we come up with a program with the school IDs and things like that's great, but somebody's got to administer that, right? So we're going to need some additional assistance. So those are the 3 main things that this will help us to do, in addition to helping us with some better reporting and technology, which I know is something that's part of our strategic plan, something that the city, it's part of the city's strategic plan as well, to do better on strategic planning, DEI metrics, all that stuff. So this position will help us hopefully upgrade our technology, and this position can help us with that as well. So those are the reasons we need this position.
Councilmember Miller.
Thank you, Mayor. Jim, can you talk a little bit about what's going to happen when they merge us into one MSA with Appleton?
Sure.
Can you touch on that and what that looks like coming down the road?
Yeah, and that's a great question that I didn't mention yet, but if we get merged into one municipal area with Appleton, which from what I've heard, everybody I've talked to said that they didn't do it 10 years ago, back in 2010. It sounds like it's a foregone conclusion, and that's going to bring additional mandates for additional reporting, as well as we're going to have to be able to work with our peer system in Appleton and manage and report out on our resources. So some of the money that now goes to Winnebago County, we will now be directly responsible for, which means we have to manage that grant. And we'll also have to be doing some additional reporting with Appleton and reporting to the feds and states on how we're going to divvy out that money. And these are going to be, it's just more mandated reporting that right now I don't know how we'd even do that because we don't have the resources. So this would give us a little bit more leeway as well to help when that happens. And like I said, it sounds like it's a foregone conclusion. We won't know for sure until the end of the year, but with that mandated reporting, we just don't have the capability to do right now. Like I said, we're struggling with what we already have to do.
And I can add that at the East Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission last week in Fond du Lac at the DOT offices, that was referenced in some anticipated work plan for East Central in anticipation of that merger.
So just in closing, I mean, I can assure you that if you do approve that, it's not going to impact the levy at all this year, and it probably won't for the foreseeable future. At the most, it would impact, it would be 20%, because our levy only funds 20% of transit anyway. But we'll figure it out internally how to do that.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move for approval of enhancement 14, management analyst, 84,400.
Second.
Deputy Mayor?
So this is one of those ones, it's a bit of a struggle, because it does have an impact, and we're trying not to impact. We have through our votes, and I have to be, I have to account for that in how I go about representing the people, but this is one of those ones where, one, if I can get 60% from the Fed and state, I want to take every single dime I can possibly get. Two, the reporting requirements are becoming a nightmare for several of our areas. Public Works and Transit are probably the two biggest. So for the value, and I have to have faith and trust that when said, it will not impact the levy. Now, I've had that before. I've had that promise that we're going to control, and it hasn't worked. But I support it, and so I put it on the floor for a vote.
Councilmember Ford?
I'll say, well said, Deputy Mayor, and very much appreciate Director Collins, you coming out here and telling us how you're going to pay for it and keeping it in your operations budget. And that's exactly the kind of information I think we need to make a decision when we delve into these areas. So happy to support that.
It also, I think, brings to light, again, what was said earlier about, having the grant writing and administration capacity on staff on a number of issues. And I can't help but think that there are other areas that we could also use some grant writing, whether it's sustainability, equity, transit, which falls within that realm. I'll be supporting it. If there's no further discussion, please call the roll.
Hanson?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
Erickson?
Aye.
Ford?
Aye.
Mugrower?
Aye.
Palmieri?
Aye.
Carried.
Councilmember Miller?
Thank you. I've got one last one I want to talk about. Number 11, the museum, the curator. Sarah, can I get you to come on up? I'm sure you're bored senseless, but.
Good answer, right?
First of all, thank you. I'm simply amazed at what you've accomplished in such a short period of time coming here, and especially you elaborating with the school district the other day and how you want to work hand in hand and get the kids in there. So I truly was impressed. But it had to be a little disheartening for a newcomer to see up here as a C and in the red. Obviously, you're probably not going to get any funding. But talk to us about your plan, what you're going to do. And I shouldn't say it's a foregone conclusion, but you didn't make the A list. But can you talk about a little bit what you're going to do, what kind of Band-Aid you're going to throw on this in the interim?
Well, so just kind of long-term looking at the educational programming that we've already started, the museum has made a commitment to not cut back on any of that. The services that we are now providing to OASD through both in-person and virtual field trips, we're going to continue to do that. In the short term, I'm going to be working with staff, but to be very transparent, I think if council decides not to vote in favor of this position, I would be talking with the city manager to alter one of the recently vacated positions that we have to accommodate the curator of education position. I say that with everybody needing to understand that one person, regardless of their position in the museum, can't handle the influx of over 1,200 kids coming. So this would be a short-term fix, and I would be coming back again next year to replace the position that we would be changing, so.
I like the creativity, thank you. Nobody else has any questions for you, Sarah?
Well, I guess I was a little, it was a little deflating when we were in the joint meeting with the Oshkosh Area School District, with the board, and, I had the impression that they had a dedicated person, but then I learned later it was only at a very minimal amount. So I appreciate Ms. Phillips addressing this in another way and coming up with somewhat of her own solution, or the museum's own solution. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I appreciate the creativity as well, to try to make sure that you're achieving your objectives and the mission of the museum. I can say unequivocally, over the last 5 years, I've been the one pushing for more kids in that building, because it's the right thing to do, it's the right thing, and I didn't say it when we were at the school board, but it probably wasn't the right time, but it was very disappointing for several years that the biggest customer was Neenah School District, not the Oshkosh Area School District, and I love that is flipping, that partnership's been reformed and that we're moving in the right direction. I struggle with, unfortunately, the financial side of matching my actions with my desires, because I want to fund it. I know that the position is needed to make sure that those kids have that experience and that those opportunities are there. But given everything we have, this is the unfun part of this decision-making is I can't fund it. I can't vote yes for it. I'm thankful that you have the creativity for it. I'm confident that there is a community member or a community organization that potentially could assist with those endeavors, that there are those in this community that have a heart for the museum and that are very supportive financially. And I'm hopeful that through some of our partnerships that we already have, that there might be an option for some of that in the near future. And would love to see your request again coming before us. So just wanted to share why I can't.
I'm happy to fill your request.
Sounds like you have a meeting with the city manager, potentially.
She'll be back.
All right, so, did we get a motion and a second on this one, or was
Nope.
it just
Nope,
questions?
nope,
Okay.
just a question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to introduce a motion, going back to item 6 and 1, items 6 and 1. We did not have a formal motion or second or vote up or down on that. So I believe that this was going to be a workshop, and we weren't actually doing votes until later. So my apologies. Otherwise, I would have handled that differently. So I would like to introduce a motion to set aside $150,000 to address 1 year to cover needs in items 6 and 1 under the lower no impact on the levy. And so moving that out of our top area into our bottom area here, again, suggesting this go back to fulfill at least in part the requests that were made, as these items have been long unaddressed. So that is my motion.
So to set aside, you said $150,000?
To cover items
1 and 6,
Enhancement 6 and 1.
and to utilize, are you saying fund balance?
Yes, fund balance, removing that from under the levy for 1 year.
Okay, so I'll just read this back and please correct me if I'm not correct. Set aside $150,000 for number 1 and number 6, enhancements number 1 and number 6, to utilize fund balance, that, no levy impact.
Correct.
I'll second for sake of discussion.
All right. Councilmember Miller.
Thank you. So setting the money aside is clear, but what do you plan on doing specifically with the money and how much to each category?
So I would imagine that this would need to be addressing Mr. Fitzpatrick here. I believe a couple of years ago, there was an intention for a position that was added to handle some of the DEI more, I think, internal pieces. So I don't know if this is something that you can see potentially addressing a portion, because you've sat in on a number of the DEI meetings. You're aware of our sustainability plan and the position they requested, and this seems to be your area of expertise and finesse. Is this something that you could support?
I guess I'm just trying to understand, if I could just ask you a few more questions associated with
yes.
what your thoughts are. So are you suggesting that this be a contracted position, and would it be responsible for both areas, kind of working in the nexus of social justice, because that's a component of both areas? Is that what you're thinking,
Yes.
or are you thinking separately?
No, I'm thinking both of these have requested specific positions with their
Right.
greatest,
Yes.
desires.
Yes.
And acknowledging that we can't fulfill all of those items, bringing these two together in an equity and environmental justice way that addresses some of both.
I haven't had direct discussions with the Sustainability Board, so I can't really speak to that. I know Ms. Nyforth has had dialogue with them about that. But I know that the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee has talked about a position for quite some time. I know the council has talked about that for quite some time. I know that, and I don't want to be too long-winded with this, but I know that there was some concern expressed about the Sustainability Committee has brought forward a plan that the council has blessed. The DEI Committee has not done that yet. So there was, concern about, who's more deserving. So I think what I hear you saying is, can there be some compromise? Can maybe a professional serve in both capacities and provide assistance to both groups moving forward? And I think certainly that's something that we could explore.
And I think the main emphasis that I heard from both is the need for grant writing, which perhaps, maybe that's a big ask for a one-year contract or an FTE. So I don't know if that answered your question, Councilmember Miller.
No, no, thank you, Mayor, but I guess I'm just a little hesitant to create some, I mean, have we gotten any bids on this, Fitz? Do we know the dollar amounts?
We haven't done anything with a combined position. We haven't done any research associated with that at this point.
And I get the mayor's position. So I think it was the mayor and myself a couple years ago through a budgetary number. I think it was probably at the budget meetings 2 years ago. So we threw out you're probably going to remember, $20,000 or $25,000 budget for DEI, and we've continued that funding. And instead of creating a joint one, which I don't even know if that person exists, I guess the DEI, they're not out of money, right? We've got
That part has still been set aside in the operating budget.
okay.
And those funds are shared for assistance to the DEI committee, but also city initiatives in regard to training for DEI
Yeah,
activity.
So I guess where I would be at is, I can't support just whipping up a joint position, but because DEI is already funded for a consultant, I would be okay in adding 20, what did we give DEI? I think
25.
25,000.
Pretty sure it was 25, but I guess I'd defer to the finance director. I believe it's in the,
But I think that was a one-time.
is that correct,
No,
Mark?
we're still.
Oh, is it
Yeah.
annually?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
My apologies.
So I guess what I'd be willing to do is do the same thing for sustainability as we did for DEI and set aside $25,000 for them to figure things out. Because I think we're shooting from the hip here, merging two positions together. I don't know if anybody's going to be for that or what, and until we figure things out, I think it's a stepping stone to get us started.
All right, so we had the motion, we had the second discussion. So are you offering an amendment then?
I am, Mayor, thank you. Thank you for pointing out my inability to speak.
No, I'm trying to keep track of myself here.
Yeah. So I guess I would make a motion that we set aside $25,000 out of the general fund to get a sustainability
Contracted service.
contract. Thank you.
Consultant.
Thank you, Fitz. Thank you. Yes. Jesse, I know I'm not making it easy on you tonight. My apologies.
So this is out of the general fund versus fund balance?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Wait a minute, my motion was to take it out of fund balance,
Right.
so,
You want to put it on the lever, you want to pay cash?
Pay cash, sorry.
all right,
So it's
okay.
fund
Yep,
balance?
thank you.
So it's fund
Yep.
balance? Okay.
A second?
All right, so we'll vote on the amendment. I've got this right. It's getting late.
It's late, it's late.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We are shooting from the hip. We're trying to create something out of nothing. And to me, it feels as though we're trying to throw money at something. I'm going to be really honest, because we've been here 3 hours, just to say we did something, and I don't buy into it. I haven't done any budget before this. I remember when I think that proposal was put on the floor, I believe I said the same thing that night, and I voted against it. The committee asked for something. I like the idea of giving them an up or down vote on that something. Unfortunately, I like it clean like that. If the committee and staff want to come back to us with a request for consultant help, especially using fund balance, they can do that at any point during the year. If the city manager would like to, if he works with those or they come to him and that's something that they want to put on the agenda, it's a fund balance thing and it doesn't require a levy impact, so there's really not massive budget considerations to take into account. That's absolutely something that can be brought to us, but I don't like the idea of creating something on the fly to just say we did. So I can't support either one, the amendment or the original.
Councilmember Ford?
Yeah, I'm with you, Deputy Mayor. All right, I mean, that's firmly in the realm of operations, the AD task. I agree, I'm all for giving them $25,000 for a consultant, but I need to hear what they want. And I realize that's totally inconsistent with what we've done here tonight, to get on my soapbox, but I mean, a form of government, if we're supposed to be a governance body, we sure are really deep into operations tonight, in a way I've never experienced in 3 years, and I think that's why we have some of these strange decisions that we're having to make. So I hope this comes back. I hope that the committee fleshes out what they want to do and comes back with it. But I agree, I don't think we should make it up on the fly.
Jesse, I'm going to make this easy. I will withdraw my amendment.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think going back to an earlier discussion, city manager has some limitations, but 25,000, he could wave his wand on that, from that side of it. So, yeah, I hope that we do hear back from Sustainability Advisory Board, because I'm really, really confident that that money would definitely pay for itself. were we to probably receive one of the numerous grants that get left on the table. So, all right,
Did
so
the
then,
second for that withdrawal as well?
we had a second for withdrawal, so it's withdrawn. And now we need to vote on the original motion. So, actually, okay, sorry, guys. We're back to the original motion that I made. And I will just say, let's call the roll on that one.
Jess, could you read it to us, please? Thank you.
The motion is to set aside $150,000 for number 1 and number 6, which were the planning, or the sustainability manager and DEI coordinator, to utilize fund balance with no levy impact.
All right, please call the roll.
Hanson,
No.
Miller,
No.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
No.
Mugrower,
No.
Palmieri.
Aye.
Motion fails.
Deputy Mayor.
I'm just making sure that nobody else wants to.
Yeah, I
press
didn't
the
see
button.
anybody else, come on.
The only thing I want to share, I have no more motions to make at this time, which might, right, everybody's heard enough from me speaking tonight. I've heard enough of myself. So right now, as we stand, unless the finance director would like to correct me if I'm wrong, enhancements 2, 3, and 4, the modified 4, will have a levy impact, and we will go from a 4.19% levy impact to a 4.54% levy impact. That is a total of $153,600. That will take us, currently, where we were sitting before today, we were at $69.29 increase on the average $100,000 home. That pushes us to almost exactly $75, about $75.08, I think. Now, to Councilmember Ford's point tonight, and I am thankful for his presence on this council and for how he goes about things. 4.19% was my appetite. Well, I should say 3-something was my appetite. 4-ish won out many months ago. And I won't make the motion tonight. I want you to think about it, and I want Finance Director Van Gompel to consider it, because I may make it at the next meeting. But to use fund balance of $153,600 applied towards our debt service, freeing up levy to then pay for these additional positions. In a nutshell, holding the line at 4.19%. That we use fund balance to buy down the debt even further, freeing up the levy for these roles. It's not applying cash to ongoing operations, it's applying cash to debt and freeing that up for us to use towards these positions. I think it's reasonable, I think it's prudent, and I guess I just want to leave you guys with that. Think about it, and at the next meeting, I know he wants to have a clean budget approval, but there's a chance that we may have an amendment that night to do that. And I'd like to hear from others in terms of their appetite for that maybe, and I don't have to bring it forward if a few of you scream at me and tell me no.
I think I've got to think about it a little bit, but I think it's admirable that you're bringing it forward.
Because doesn't that only buy it down for the 1 year? Because that takes care of like 1 year, but these are ongoing items beyond that 1 year.
No different than the $2 million more that we're putting towards debt service this year to make sure that our levy impact is reasonable and manageable. And that's why going towards it, it is budgeted, it's fully on the levy, and I'm paying for it with available levy by freeing it up from debt service. It is moving it from one fund to another. No, it is, you know, it's not moving things around too difficult, but it's a way to hold the levy at a lower number that was desirable for a few of us.
Well, thanks for throwing that out there, Deputy Mayor. Are there other council members that would like to look at any of these other enhancement items?
I'm good.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I'm assuming we'll get a recap.
We will
beyond this.
re-summarize
And-
this.
And that was 4.5, where did we end up?
4.54.
4.54. All right. So our next meeting will be November 9th, and that will be at 6 PM. And that will be the evening that we vote on this budget.
For our regular listeners and viewers, it's a Wednesday, not a Tuesday.
Yes, yes.
So, Jesse, do you want to throw a plug for what's next Tuesday and get people out?
November 8th is our general election. Polls will be open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. If you wish to, please get out there and vote.
And early voting ends on Friday, correct?
5 p.m. Friday, it'll end in our office. Yes.
All right. Thank you, everybody. We'll take motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 We are adjourned.